Everyone has something to share, in either wisdom, story, or logic. And it's clearly amazing to hear all the differing missing links discovered by people, unique to their own journeys, and in how they have come to discover them. Together, we can help to build a bigger picture for a better future, for a brighter tomorrow. Let's stand united. Let's remove the veils, and let's create a new world together. Are you that missing link? Join Jesse Hal on the Missing Link Talk Show as he helps to unveil the mystery through the unique wisdom and store of others.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody here back to the Missing Link. Today we are excited and honored to have someone who's been practicing astrology, yoga, meditation, and healing disciplines for over 20 years. His training includes yoga works, personal training certification, astrology training and study. His dedication to understanding his craft is evident in his professionalism, shared knowledge, and highly specialized skill set. Welcome to the Missing Link, Adam Sanchez. How you doing, brother?
So great to be here. Thank you so much for that warm welcome and a nice introduction. And just really delighted and excited. I know you on Facebook for several years now. I want to say like 5 years or something, maybe.
Probably 5 or more.
It feels like, I was gonna say maybe more, but and I just love, I've loved your energy from the very beginning, and I especially love what you've been doing with your podcast and just getting the message of truth, unity, awareness out into the world. And so especially for that, I'm super honored to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Why don't you start off with telling us about yourself, telling us about your journey, a little bit about your background, your education, what part of the world you grew up in, what part of the world you're in now, if you like disclosing that information, anything about yourself and your journey, what got you into the spiritualism, the yoga, the personal training, anything about you that you wanted to share with the audience here today, especially if they're maybe hearing you here for the first time.
Awesome. I'm just taking some notes here because I don't think I'll remember all of those questions, but feel free to guide me or repeat or, just hone my responses as well. So, okay. So a little bit about me and my background. I am currently now in my hometown of New York City. I was born and raised here, and so much to say about that, but I'll just say, I really appreciate it in lots of ways. It was difficult growing up in such a crowded, high stress, high intensity environment, but I really am super grateful for the education that it afforded me. It provided me with a lot of access to things that I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else, and pushed me to be the best that I could, if not for competition, just for the opportunity that it presented, which is why I came back. Actually, I was just traveling in India for about 6 months, doing my spiritual work, my healing work, some amazing things happening over there. And I came back to New York, to my hometown for the first time properly in many years since I moved to Florida about 2016. I finally left New York for a more peaceful life, a better quality of life, something more in touch with nature. And I came back finally now for work opportunities. I'm really ready to step up and be of greater service with the work that I do. And New York is a really excellent place for work and making connections and meeting with the movers and the shakers of the world in our country, because it's a very leading edge place. Lots of open-mindedness for as much as there can be closed-mindedness and regressiveness. There's also a lot of progressiveness and just that cutting edge sort of environment. So it's really great to be here for that. More about my story. Well, I mentioned New York. I'm not one of these people, and yoga teaches us this, right? To let go of the identity. It's not about demonizing the identity or saying that the ego is evil in and of itself, but it is about recognizing the great power that we can access when we're no longer limited by identifying with our ego and, our identity and just, I am this and I'm my job and I'm my address and I'm the fact that I'm a New Yorker, all that stuff, right? But it does speak a lot to my origin stories and my life path. Let's put it this way. Lots of opportunity, but it's also very, very stressful environment, I would say, as far as to the point of being unhealthy. I know we have some New Yorkers here watching the cast. I just saw someone commenting here. I hope your mental health is well. Depression is very, very rampant in this city, actually. And, it's understandable because you have all these people living in such close quarters and quality of life might not always be the best. So that was something that really affected me deeply. I didn't even understand those things growing up, but just anxiety and depression are some things that are really, really common here that I also definitely experienced a lot as a child. I was actually first suicidal and depressed at 7 years old, which is, kind of early.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was a pivotal time in my life as well, but I think the environment had a lot to do with it. And, my own life choices and life path, for sure. I do believe that there is a higher divine order behind all of these things, and astrology gets into a lot of those details as well. We can actually glean why and how those things show up for us. But, I started to battle basically, or just experience mental illness at a very young age. And so by the time that I was 14, not only was I clinically depressed, long-term as well. And of course, there's also seasonal affective disorder, right? SAD, where that's a very real thing. You don't get a lot of sunlight in New York in the winter months, and that can affect people's mood and emotions. And that was definitely the case for me, which is why I ultimately left New York to live in Florida. And by the way, my depression has never been better since I left New York. In fact, that first winter that I wasn't in New York, it was the least depressed winter I had ever had. And it was a very rainy, dark winter in Florida that winter. So, there's so many things that matter when we talk about these things, and environment is huge. And so, my journey with all of these things really compelled me to learn and understand more about mental health and how to achieve those things for myself. I mean, I was well adjusted enough. I was a pretty good kid and behaved well for the most part. I was also pretty mischievous and rebellious too, but for the most part, I didn't give my parents too many problems until I was a teenager. And then, the rebellion came in full on. But that was also coinciding with the depression and the anxiety. So I was really working hard to find my own place in the world and my own path in life. Started seeing therapists and getting the help in the established industries, but I never really found any support there. I just kind of managed to communicate my own needs a little bit more effectively and go after getting them met by communicating them, to the best of my ability as a teenager. I mean, it's hard to have those skills at any age, let alone at such a young age, right? So when I went to college is when my desire for health and wellness really started to become apparent. I was in the City University of New York and started at John Jay College. And, John Jay College is famous for criminal justice. So my track at that time was to become forensic psychologist. So I started learning all about psychology and physiology and how the brain and the body are connected and neurotransmitters. And I always loved biology. And it's just always so fascinating to me that I was like, wow, this is how the brain works. Wow, this is how, our body works, and it's how they work together. I was hooked. I just couldn't stop learning all about these things. And, of course, to apply it to myself as well. I was like, oh, wow, okay, I see this in myself. And, oh, I kind of do that. So maybe I don't do that so much now that I know how it works and I can avoid it. These kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit neurodivergent. So my trains of thought and storylines might go a little bit haywire sometimes, or
that's fine. We're enjoying listening to you, so you're doing great.
I appreciate it. If it ever gets confusing, feel free to just let me know. But excuse me one second. The point I forgot to mention about the tangential story so far is that at that time when I was 14, I also had a tumor in my left eye socket. Yeah, it wasn't cancerous, but there's more about that. We'll talk. Actually, it showed up later. I had cancer by the time I was 30, stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it makes sense in hindsight because even though I didn't have a cancerous tumor at the time, benign tumors often predate cancerous ones. So, it was growing in my system. And part of that is in the environment, growing up just in America in general, I would say you can find this issue, but especially because New York is almost like hyper-American. Speaking of SAD, I was very much on the SAD diet, right? Standard American diet of sugar and carbohydrates and, devoid of nutrients and full of chemicals. So, it makes sense that I was having all these health issues, but none of that stuff made sense at the time. By the time I found out about the Hodgkin's lymphoma, I was already doing deeper work. I got into spirituality and other alternative healing disciplines towards the end of my college career, when I realized that the medical route wasn't working for me. I decided to go pre-med after I realized I liked psychology so much I wanted to become a psychiatrist. So I went that route. I got deeper into anatomy and physiology, and I absolutely loved it. But after about a year and a half of pre-med, something was just feeling really off in my soul, and it just wasn't right for me. So I, let it go. I actually started traveling even then, going to Spain and India, like doing more soul searching. But by the time that I was in my late 20s, I started to come across what I might call a little bit more esoteric information. It's not esoteric in the sense of like ancient occult stuff. It's esoteric in the sense like it's basic scientific knowledge that's suppressed and hidden and most people don't know. For instance, there's something called an alkaline diet, which was literally a lifesaver. I mean, not figuratively, literally saved my life and helped me to reverse that cancer by the time that I was 30. I had found out about the alkaline diet basically just before I finally left New York, because I left a couple of times, talk about back and forth. But the final time I left, for that long stretch when I went to Florida, before I left to go to Florida, I just found out about the alkaline diet, and I started to shift my diet so that, I could see some healing. Now, why that's important. So basically, the blood in the human body is naturally alkaline. 7.365 is the natural pH for human blood. And so, yay, we have some people who know about the alkaline diet. That's so great. It is, something that you'll hear the medical establishment try and debunk, saying that, well, the blood always stays at 7.365. And, if you don't, that's a very terminal condition called acidosis. And that's true. That part is true. But where they're wrong in saying is what they usually say, their rhetoric is that, well, the kidney's job is to buffer the blood. Also true. But where are the kidneys getting the capacity to buffer the blood? How do they do that? I mean, it's not just like magic where the kidneys can take, anything that comes at them and just neutralize it, right? There's a consequence to what we eat. Now, of course, the establishment doesn't want to talk about that because it eats into their business model about pills and keeping people on pills and not actually causing any cures, right? It's just keeping people on their teats. But the kidneys use minerals in the body to buffer or break down acids, right? That's how the kidneys work. That's how the body works. Now, that's the simple guiding point of the alkaline diet, is we want to really focus on mineral-rich foods, which are primarily vegetables, and avoid minerally devoid foods like high starch, complex carbohydrates, pastas, breads, things that are, really inculcated in our culture. So acids burn, bases build. Acids will burn down our body, break things down, and the bases, the minerals, will build it up. You can think of, how minerals crystallize and turn into crystals over time, right? Well, our bodies are meant to be crystalline in a sense. Even water is said to be a liquid crystal, right? In its proper structure. And so our bodies are supposed to have that too. But in the wrong environment, whether it's our outside environment or the biochemical environment of our body, things are going to start to break down and not work properly. So if you want to talk about practical terms, what that looks like is having 80% of your plate vegetables, especially if you have any health issues and you're trying to reverse health issues. If your body's balanced and you just want to maintain balance, it's about 60% of your plate vegetables. And then you can have the other, percent, whatever. So proteins, carbohydrates, sugar, alcohol, and caffeine are the most highly acid forming foods that we eat. And those are like the main things that everyone's eating. Whereas vegetables are alkalizing. Anything that's mineral rich is going to be alkalizing. And that's what's going to help to buffer those acids that the kidneys have to deal with. But, if you're having lower back issues, if you're having inflammation, if you're having chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, exhaustion, your body's most likely acidic. I mean, most people's body are acidic. You can even tell from the tongue, right? I had seen an acupuncturist at the time that I discovered this diet. I mean, I didn't discover it so much. It came to my awareness. I had 3 different things happening at the same time. This was before I left New York and started to address, health issues in my body that were really starting to present themselves. I was having a lot of acid reflux. So that was my first clue. My second clue is I went to see an acupuncturist about my shoulder because I had just finished my yoga teacher training. This was in 2010. And all the yoga, all the stretching, all the physical training I was doing was not helping with this like frozen shoulder pain that I had. It was, very disheartening. So I went to see this acupuncturist to help address it. And he tells me, just by looking at my tongue, because it had a white coat on it, that my blood was acidic. And I was like, okay. The very same day or the very next day, I had a date with someone who was on an alkaline diet. And I'm like, okay, universe, I'm paying attention, right? What is this alkaline diet? What does it mean? How do I do it? And, it was very difficult, but in the beginning, it's just like, okay. So instead of having like a whole plate of pasta with lots of cheese on it, I ended up having, kale, tomatoes, avocados, cucumbers, and like this much angel hair, spelt pasta. And, I actually started to have some deep healing. And I had my first lower back injury when I was 21, and that was a health sign or a health warning that my body was giving me that I didn't know what it meant because I didn't know Chinese medicine then like I do now. And in Chinese medicine, if you have a lower back injury, that means there's something going on with the kidneys because the kidneys are located near the lower back, right? And the way the meridians run, that's a telltale sign. So, I had this lower back injury from 21 years old, which is very young. Most people don't start to have lower back injuries until they're in their 30s. And it didn't even properly heal. I still had pain and tension in that area of my back until I went on the alkaline diet, which was like 6 years later. 6 or 7 years later, that one of the first nights on that diet, I could actually feel that same spot in my body on my back. I was laying down, relaxing, falling asleep. And I felt it like twitch, 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 and then like relax for the first time since I had injured, right? So experiencing this phenomenology in my body on this path has been extensive. I mean, I could write a book about it, but and someone's talking about not too much though. Yeah, you do want to keep it in balance. You can go too far to the alkaline way, which is something called alkalosis, right? So it's not about being extreme. It's about creating balance in the body. And, your body will tell you if you listen to it. That's one of the biggest things that the ego often gets in the way for us is that we'll think something over feeling it. It's like, we'll crave something in the mind rather than feeling what our body actually needs, right? So I'm actually doing this course called Never Get Sick Again, 44 Days to Immune System Mastery. And one of the main principles that I really, really impart to my participants is, well, how does your body feel about this? What does your body have to say about this? Does your body like this food? Is it enhanced? Does it feel better by eating this meal? Or does it feel worse? Does it feel like its energy is drained? Just by getting more in touch with our body out of the head and into the body can be a huge healing path for so many of us. And that was definitely something that I was starting to experience with this alkaline diet. Now, fast forward a few years later, I'd been on the alkaline diet, but actually where I got it confused in my timeline was my first attempt to leave New York, or as I was calling it at the time, escape from New York, was to move to Colorado. So that was back when I was about 27. So that was like 2011. And I had just finished my yoga teacher training. In 2010. So it was like within a year, a few short months after my yoga teacher training, which took place in New York City with Yoga Works, really exceptional school, really leader in the industry. Within 6 months, I had my personal training certification. And then within just a few months, sorry, I got a little distracted from one of the comments there, trying to keep up with them. I moved, I left New York. I was like, I need a healthier life. I need a healthier environment. I'm going to Colorado, right? I had a friend out there who took me into his home and, gave me support to get my life started over there. But it was also not only a start of a new life, it was the start of a new career. So I just started my yoga teacher personal training career right around the same time. And so when I moved out, as people who've moved might know, moving is stressful. It's, challenging on the finances and stuff. And so, my finances were not there to support the alkaline diet because, let's be honest, vegetables are much more expensive than carbohydrates, right? I'm also noticing people talk about the carnivore diet. I don't have as much experience with the carnivore diet. I was much more into veganism at the time. I'm not currently a stickler for veganism. I am technically plant-based because alkaline is plant-based. It's mostly plants. But I do have meat with those plants, and my body seems to do the best these days with that combination. I hear great things about the carnivore diet. I believe, in it. And also, I think you're probably going to get a lot more nutrients from meat that's well produced than you would from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are really the culprit of so many health issues compared to anything else that I've seen. So, but in any case, I wasn't able to keep up with the alkaline diet when I moved out to Colorado. So, my health started to suffer again a little bit. I was doing the best I could financially, but eventually I had to leave Colorado because I didn't plan on staying there forever. It's too cold. Honestly, it's beautiful, but I prefer the Florida warmth, and my body was really needing that after so many cold winters in New York. But it didn't work out. I had to actually come back to New York. And that's where it was just before I got back to New York. I'd spent a short month in Florida or so. And it was there right before my 30th birthday that I discovered stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma in my body and started to address it. Now, I had known about the health issues, starting with the lower back. And then right around the time of my yoga teacher training and that acidic feeling in my body, I was starting to get liver pain. And then it was the shoulder pain. And so, yeah, I switched it because my left shoulder is the one that's hurting these days a little bit, but nothing like that right side of my body used to hurt back then. And so I noticed something was going on in my body, but I didn't know what it was. When I started to do the alkaline diet, it started to get better, but I wasn't able to keep up with it. So it kind of, vacillated back and forth until finally I discovered the cancer. I mean, this is a whole other long topic about, I actually diagnosed myself, and people are like, oh, you can't do that. That's like illegal. Says who? I mean, I know my body better than any doctor. So why not? And, we can talk about that conversation. I feel like we're probably going to have to, since I let that cat out of the bag, and I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to go on another tangent, and that's a longer one. But the point is, I affirm that we can know our bodies better than any other person, and we have to, because no one else lives in our body. No one else has our experience. And the idea that someone's going to gaslight us out of, our own symptomology, to me is really crazy. But no, there's tons of proof. I mean, never mind my medical history, never mind the massive sugar addiction that I had from childhood on, which sugar feeds cancer, right? So right around the same time, I find out that sugar feeds cancer and a ketogenic cleanse can cure it, right? And so I'm like, okay, yeah, restaurant food is mainly bad for our bodies. So true. I mean, I almost don't eat out these days because so often it will get me sick, and I have the best quality food at home, and also oftentimes to the best taste. I mean, I ended up becoming a chef because of all the cooking I had to do for myself. So yeah, illegal to feel and understand your own body, medical mafia. Well said, Lori. So yeah, sorry, too many tangents. Lost my train of thought. Give me 1 second. So
no worries. You got the Hodgkinson lymphoma. They were diagnosing yourself.
Right. With the ketogenic diet was actually how I was able to do that. So I might as well just go on that tangent and explain how that happened. But basically, I'm going to start off with the science that was brought to my attention through social media. I saw this post online talking about, it was titled "A Ketogenic Cancer Cleanse," and it called for 1 tablespoon of coconut oil every hour and lots of lemons or turmeric and cayenne pepper, some kind of anti-inflammatory, and a gallon of water throughout the day. Right now, and the way they explained it, they actually explained it. I don't know if it was in the meme or in the post, but another way to label cancer is with the term anaerobic cell death. So what that means is basically the cells stop oxidizing or using oxygen to get their energy, and instead get their energy through fermentation. Now, the main problem with that is it's highly less efficient. If you're talking about physiology, this is like personal training and biology stuff. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? So it gives us our energy through oxidation. And it does that through creating this chemical called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, right? And that is the currency of the cell. That little molecule ATP is where we get our energy. And so the mitochondria make about, I think, don't quote me about the exact number, but it's something like 16 ATP molecules in oxidation, right? In the presence of oxygen, where they make 2 ATP molecules in fermentation, right? So fermentation is much less efficient, and fermentation thrives in a low oxygen, high sugar environment, right? Which you'll hear people talk about in, the budding cancer awareness industry these days. I mean, not the established one, the alternative one, where people are actually being educated about what this is. So that's the anaerobic cell death. So basically, your cells turn into zombies if they're not getting their proper nutrition, if they're flooded with sugar, and they start to just thrive in that sugar environment to the best that they can. But it's not actually thriving because they're not designed for that. Side note, another little tangent that's totally related, I promise. I'd started to discover my own sugar addiction a few years prior to all this stuff. I started to notice, oh, my sugar intake is really high, and I think it was, it was about around the same time as my yoga teacher training, might have been just within the year of it, where I actually asked the question. I looked it up online. I was like, why is sugar bad for you? Like, it never even occurred to me to look into this, right? Well, the basic science is this. Glucose is sugar, right? It's the chemical molecule, and it does not metabolize all on its own. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Metabolism requires many things to function properly, particularly vitamins, minerals, and enzymes to break down the glucose and assimilate it into the body properly. So the problem with most sugar, especially the highly processed white toxic poison sugars, is that there is nothing else but glucose there present. It's the only nutrient, and metabolism doesn't work that way. So what happens when you intake all that sugar is, especially the fake processed ones that don't have their own trace minerals, your body will leach out its own minerals to digest that sugar. So the minerals in your organs and your bones and your blood are being sucked out of those areas to break down the sugars in your system to just neutralize all those acids, right? Back to those mineral acid, neutralization. So, understanding that, it's like, okay, yeah, sugar is actually a major culprit. And it depends really on the kind of sugar. Obviously, fruit sugar is going to be the best because it's living, it's full of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, all the things our body needs to digest it. So, yeah, the sugar conversation started to become very relevant for me. And that first day that I did the ketogenic cancer cleanse, I started to have major releases in that lower back pain that I had been referencing, right? Now, it was, I want to call it, it's not transcendent. It was otherworldly. It was metaphysical. There was some deep stuff happening, and I'll explain. So by starving your body from the sugar and using a ketogenic source of energy, in this case, coconut oil, right? It cuts off the source that's driving that fermentation and feeding the cancer growth. So it halts the fermentation, it halts the spread of the cancer. And by flooding it with proper energy that your body can utilize, the coconut oil or some kind of high quality fat, it actually gives your body the energy it needs to heal and the tools to heal with that fuel source. And then the lemon juice with the vitamin C will act as an immune booster and also cleanse out the system. So remove the toxic debris that's in the system, as well as the anti-inflammatory, cayenne pepper, garlic, turmeric, whatever, to reduce the Herxheimer reaction, the detox response that happens when you're off gassing all of this stuff. So within just 3 hours, it was my third tablespoon of coconut oil that morning, that same lower back pain that had been present for so many years, that got a little bit of healing a couple of years prior, really started to let go. I mean, like melting, like full on melting. All the tension in that area started to just release and let go. But as it did, a few things were happening. It was phenomenological. I wanted to say, not phenomenal in a good way, but like there was lots of phenomenon happening. And so 2 main things. One, it felt like shards of fiberglass moving through my body. It was excruciating. It felt like it was scraping me everywhere from the inside out.
Wow.
The second thing was, it was the most disgustingly nauseating experience of my life, hands down. I was like wanting to vomit. There's no words really to describe it. But bringing all of this together, taking that previous tangent of like, how was I able to diagnose this myself? How does anyone do that? Well, putting all the pieces together, right? I mean, all the science that I just shared with you, I mean, this is over many years of discovering it. It wasn't like one weekend I decided. This was, an epiphany of the cultivation of many years of learning, understanding, and studying. But there was also some metaphysical stuff. So I should mention the backstory to that, where I had this healer in New York City. She was actually a graduate of Barbara Brennan Healing School. Barbara Brennan was a scientist for NASA who started her own 4-year healing university. It's an accredited university. You graduate with the Bachelor of Science in Brennan Healing Science. Highly recommend all of their healers. This particular one, her name is Nivea Cruz. She's still in Queens, New York, but I'm not sure if she's currently taking any clients. But just the point is to just give her some credit, because she was one of the fundamental teachers and healers and guides on this path for me that really really kickstarted so much of my own transformation and ability to, embody and claim the divinity within me that we all carry. And so she shared something with me. Before we even spoke on the phone and got even to exchange our names. I mean, I was talking with her for 40 minutes before we even exchanged names. No exchanging of money, right? She was just answering my questions. And this was before we ever had a session. This is after years of talking about health problems with doctors. I mean, we're not even talking about, childhood health issues. I didn't even touch on those, right? It's a long story, but, trying to get any information out of doctors for all those years. Never mind that surgery where they cut into my head. It's like I asked them a couple of questions. It's like, oh, they're so bothered just that I want to find out why they're cutting open my head or how that's going to work. In sharp contrast, she was flowing freely with information for 40 minutes without even exchanging names, numbers, anything, right? So this is just to show you the quality and character of her personality. That same conversation she shared with me with zero ego. She says to me, I have the full spectrum of psychic abilities, which just means that she has every sense that we have. There's 5 senses, but each of them can also exist on a psychic level, right? So she was just explaining that, just like this is, her skill set, what she can do. And it turned out to be very true. I mean, she could see my aura. She could explain things to me. She was definitely psychic. There was no question about that in my life. And I wasn't the most gullible person. I was pretty suspicious for the first 6 months of working with her. I was like, I don't know, we'll see, but she knew things and she said things that there's no way that she could have known without psychic ability. So why I bring all of that up? Well, one day she expressed that she had, one of her particular psychic abilities was psychic smell, actually. It's not something that I think a lot of people hear about, but because every sense you can have, you can have the psychic senses. So
I know I've heard of people that have a psychic, when they see premonitions, see other people on the other side, they can smell cigar smoke from an older, like they can smell these things. So I have heard of people that when they see people that they can have reminders that they do have some of these connections through smell. Yes, I've heard that.
I love that you said that, because that's actually precisely what she said to me, was that she would smell cigar smoke. There was a gentleman who used to live in her apartment and he used to smoke cigars and he would still come by sometimes. And so they had this relationship, right? She was conscious of it. So, I mean, not only is that super cool, but at a different point in time, she brought up the fact that she could smell cancer on some of her patients.
Dogs can do that as well, that they say.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. That's proven too. There's no woo-woo about that. A little more woo in the psychic realms these days, but that's changing too, thank goodness. So interestingly enough, when she said that to me, something happened in my own system. There's something called psychic transference. And that's where someone will transmit information to you in an instant without any communication necessarily, right? Like, so someone can be thinking of something and because they're thinking about it, you'll get that image or something similarly, right? You might hear something they're thinking, trying to communicate to you, whatever. The point is there's transferring of information in the subtle psychic realms, right? So in that moment, this was many years prior to me discovering this energy in my own body. But when she said to me that she could smell cancer, I tasted it. In my mouth, in my body, there was a psychic transference. Like, I didn't get the smell because that was her gift, but I got the taste, which is one of mine. My taste is super sensitive to the point of it's highly annoying, and that's part of why I can't eat out much. And so, but it served me well in this and being able to understand it, because when I was having this detox Herxheimer reaction and this pain was basically leaving my body from this ketogenic cleanse, it tasted exactly the same as it did that day when I had that psychic transference of like how cancer smells. Well, it tasted like it. And if I had to describe it, I would say that it tasted like death and decay. It's like if you ever get some really, really bad lettuce and it just smells horrible. It's black. It's not good. You're not going to put that in your body. Well, that's what it felt like was coming out of my body. That's why it was so nauseating. But in that moment, I had only tried that cancer cleanse. It was labeled a cancer cleanse. I had only tried it out of curiosity, out of exploration, like, well, maybe this will help my health issue. Dramatically. It rapidly, incredibly. So I cannot recommend people enough, if they're dealing with any kind of cancer, get off sugar immediately. Yesterday, break your sugar addiction. It's possible. best thing to do would be to start with fruit and get off all carbohydrates, all processed sugars, because at least fruit is better. But there's some debate about this out in the alternative field. Some people say that you can heal cancer with fruit. That was not my experience. In my experience, the fruit would only feed the cancer. Now, I wasn't too diligent about exploring fruit because the information I had found out shortly after discovering the alkaline diet, when I went on that date with someone who was on it, I was told about this book called The pH Miracle by Dr. Robert O. Young. Yeah.
We've had him on our program maybe 4 or 5 times already.
I love him so much. I want to get him on a podcast as well, if you could put in a good word for me. But we're friends on Facebook and we've been communicating, but I just haven't had the guts to ask him yet because I wanted to develop a relationship with him first. But yeah, I told him, I was like, thank you so much for your book. It saved my life. I mean, he really knows his stuff. So yeah, and he's not like, he says that once your body is balanced, you can have like maybe a piece of fruit, like an apple a day, or some berries and stuff, but that we shouldn't really rely too heavily on fruit because it's still high in sugar, and we want to focus on the really mineral dense foods. So I was just avoiding it at the time altogether. But yeah, I mean, even for someone to, I subsequently, it took me about 5 years actually to break my sugar addiction. I cured my cancer first before I broke my sugar addiction, because, I could do bursts of the ketogenic cleanse for a day, 3 days, 5 days, I think was the longest I went consecutively. They say you shouldn't really go more than 10. From 3 to 10 days was the recommended, duration when I first saw this one. I would agree with that. I mean, 10 is even a lot. It's really intense. So, that might be too much for some. I never even was able to get to 10 because it was so intense in my body. But yeah, within a year and a half, I did another ketogenic cleanse for 3 days straight. And no cancer in my system, no Herxheimer reactions, just like clean. I was like, okay, cancer's done, right? Cancer's gone. And it was a real dark night of the soul stuff. I mean, I had all of the issues and the health issues for my whole life. But yeah, so Elizabeth was asking if I thought that cancer is caused by parasites.
I was going to actually ask you that, because that's the big thing is the, too much parasites, the candida overgrowth in the body, which causes kind of some of these parasites. They're saying people that have been taking this ivermectin has all of a sudden their cancer started going away because they've been dealing with the parasites. So that was something I was going to ask you once you were done, but I don't know if you want to address it now or if you want to talk about it after.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm so all over the place and I have really long stories usually, so I'm happy to interrupt and address some of these great questions. Yeah, I do believe it's highly likely. I don't have enough grounded information on it to say definitively for sure, but I think it's highly likely. There's also some information that I've come across that suggests that there are certain bacteria and fungus that are also related to cancer growth. I think it's extremely likely in the sense that there is a synergistic effect that happens in nature, just on the basic principles of alkalinity. Every disease thrives in an alkaline environment, and true immunity is based on that natural balance in the blood and the pH. So this is, Dr. Young's major assertion that has been proven time and time again, even though after I healed everything and I wanted it to not be true so I could just go back to having that standard American diet. Nope, it's proven time and time again that disease cannot exist in an alkaline environment in the body. So if our body is alkaline, there can't be parasites, there can't be bacteria or cancer, right? None of the stuff is going to be able to thrive in an immune-based alkaline environment. And the opposite is also true, that all the stuff is going to be able to thrive if it's highly acidic environment. So I think there is a negative synergistic effect also with parasites and bacteria and fungus and cancer, where they feed each other.
100%. We did have a question here from our Rumble. I don't know if you wanted to. Says, I'm a type 1 diabetic and tried to come off carbohydrates, but developed ketones and went into ketoacidosis.
Oh, wow.
Even though my glucose levels were normal. Any suggestions?
Sure. So the first most important thing I would always suggest for people is to check their hydration. And, it's so important. There's this book that I came across when I was healing all this cancer stuff. And, the primary cancer for me, it was lymphoma and stage 4. So it spread through all. And how did I know it was stage 4? Because stage 4 means it's spread through the lymph nodes in the entire body. That's stage 4. And it was in my entire right side from head to toe. I could feel it inside the lymph nodes. And I had these lymphatic issues my whole life, so that was no surprise to me. But my kidney, the right side, the lower back, was a major weak point of the whole system. and kidneys are hydration. So the whole issue of hydration became very front and center for me. I mean, I grew up, I was drinking soda for breakfast. Okay. This is like how bad it was. Never drank water. We can also talk about how polluted the water is, even, systemically on purpose. And so of course people don't want to drink that, right? Even if they're not as sensitive in their taste, their bodies probably, water used to give me heartburn. So that's not right. That's not supposed to happen if your water is clean and normal.
But polluted water is better than soda, and the soda is made by that polluted water anyways.
Yes, but the difference between the polluted water and the soda is that the soda tastes good.
Tastes good, so you're able to drink it.
And get it down, as opposed to the stuff I couldn't get down. So, my point is, though, I was super chronically dehydrated. I used to get such dry skin. And in New York, the winters are so bad, not only, just brutal cold, but they have these heating systems that are very drying. And the winter environment in New York is cold and dry. And then the heating systems dry out the air even more, right? So that on top of my own deep dehydration, superacidosis environment in my body, I used to get so itchy that I would scratch myself to the point of bleeding. Like I'm talking big swaths of skin on my legs, like this big or bigger sometimes, because that's how dehydrated my body was. Now, I didn't know that that was dehydration at the time, right? I was like mystified by this, even kind of scared. But eventually, when I started actually addressing my water and hydration at that time, all of these things started to reverse. So the point I was making about, discovering this information around that time when I was healing the cancer and dealing with the kidney and focusing on my hydration for the first time really ever in my life, I came across this book. I didn't even read it. I know they say you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but I felt like the title was just so effective at communicating this message. I didn't need to read it because it's there deeply.
Osmosis, you got it through.
Listen to this. So the book is called You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty. It kind of says it all. It's so good.
Well, Angeline, she's done a lot of healing for all the stuff that she's gone through. And she says that, I think it was like 70% or 90% of people that are chronically depressed are chronically dehydrated. Mm-hmm. Once they start hydrating, then everything else starts to function. And this comes from scientific studies that it's actually chronic dehydration that a lot of people are going through. And even if you are dehydrated, drinking buckets of water doesn't always help because you need some kind of salt, you need some kind of other things that can actually get that hydration into, or get your hydration through fruits. A lot of watermelons, a lot of cucumbers get hydrated through stuff that's actually going to be bioavailable to the body, opposed to just drinking a ton of water that you're just peeing out. You're not really hydrating your cells anyways.
Correct. Yes. I love that you beat me to all of those punches. I was going to say all that stuff because that was one of the things I learned. If you get spring water, that's good because it has naturally occurring minerals. So that will actually help hydrate you. But it's about the electrolytes. It's not just the water. People think, oh, I'm drinking all this water, I'm hydrated. No. Especially if you're drinking from plastic, it's poison. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not going to play any more games about this. People think that they're living a healthy lifestyle, but they're drinking from carcinogenic plastics. And not only is that poisoning the body, but it's dehydrating you. It's not hydrating the body because the plastic will leach into the water. And then your body can't absorb that water because it's full of plastics, microplastics. And then what's worse is your body will have to fight off that inflammation that's being introduced by those plastics into the system. So it's having an opposite effect, right? So if you cannot avoid plastics, try and get BPA-free plastics, try and get the highest quality, lowest toxicity plastics, but really a high quality filter. Clearly Filter has some really great affordable filters. Yes, it actually is a plastic pitcher, but it's a high grade medical plastic. So, you don't have to leave it in the pitcher too long. You can take it out of the pitcher, put it in glass if you want. But these kinds of nuances matter, right? And lots of people just don't think about it or don't have the time to think about it, in this matrix that we live in. So these details matter. Absolutely. One of the most hydrating things I find are fresh juices, right? Celery juice, if you can get it down. Some people really don't like it. And pure is the ideal in terms of hydrating the cells. Lemon juice, lemon water, amazing. Lime juice, lime water, also very hydrating, right? Fruits are also hydrating because they have a living natural water full of minerals. So again, we come back to the mineral content and the hydration. So back to this person's question about the ketosis. I would question, how much water were you having? Was it high quality water that was free of toxins and having the presence of electrolytes to actually get into your cells? It's the first place I would look. And also checking the quantity. Are you drinking about a gallon a day, 3 to 4 liters, depending on your body size? That also matters, right? Mullein is an amazing herb to either add to your water in powder or make teas with it that will really hydrate the system. It's super alkalizing and just really penetrates into the cells. So I can't recommend that one enough. But I would also ask, this person who asked the question about the ketones, what kind of proteins were you having? My guess would be that it was probably, acidosis. It was too much protein and not enough minerals. That's, basic principles of alkalinity. That would be the first place to look. If it's not that, there might be other places that we could look, but that's usually the first mistake people make, is that they're not getting enough greens, they're not getting enough vegetables, they're not getting enough minerals in their diet. So even just adding up, lemon content. So this is a fun one. When I saw that acupuncturist who told me about my acidic blood, he recommended cucumbers, very, very alkalizing and hydrating, but also lemons. And I asked him, I was like, well, that's weird. Isn't lemon acidic? And he's like, well, yes, but it has so many minerals that it leaves an alkaline ash, they call it, right, in the body. So I started drinking lots of lemons at that time. And through my, openness and exploratory nature with all of these things, I found out that you can actually have really high dose lemons in your body with very, very minimal side effects or potential negative consequences for most people. Some people have citrus allergies. So obviously if that's your case, then this does not apply to you. But for most people,
that lemons though are actually man-made. So if you're going to have limes. Limes are much better because that's actually God made, and lemons are actually man-made. So having lime water, just switching from lemons to limes, can have a big impact on a person's body as well.
Are you also a Dr. Sebi fan? Is that where you're getting that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I love his stuff. He was a big inspiration on my healing path as well. There's so many people to mention. It's hard to keep track of them sometimes, but I love his diet. I find it's really the cleanest when I follow it as much as possible, but it's also very restrictive. So I don't follow it all the time. And as much as I deeply, deeply appreciate his work, I also don't fully agree with it in the sense like he's against garlic. He says it's very acidic, but it definitely has medicinal properties, and I've experienced it firsthand. So
same with me. I listen to everybody, but you're your own best doctor, like you said, just because. And also when you were talking about blood types, so some people can thrive on, just a carnivore diet when some people can't, right? Some people can't just go completely vegetarian because they start to get sick. So they need to have some of these additional proteins like meat. So just because one person, one doctor, one person on the Missing Link says some things that, you really resonate, it might not be the right thing for you. You need to know what's best for you based on how it makes you feel, and you judge things based on what's best for you, not based on what other people are saying, because you know you better than anyone else.
100,000%. And another factor inside of that also is there's so much complexity and nuance to each individual person that, there's so many things that could show up that we might not expect or understand just at first blush. So that being said, I know there's so much variation. At the same time, the principles of alkalinity are really, in my experience, universally applicable. I mean, I haven't seen anyone who earnestly and successfully, that is to say, adequately and accurately following the parameters of the alkaline diet, who doesn't experience massive benefit from it. Another thing I love about it is that there is flexibility. So in that, 20% of acidic forming foods like proteins or carbohydrates, right? You can basically have whatever you want. I mean, obviously you don't want to have like super processed crap food, but you can still have, your traditional foods, the things that are normally in your diet. And so you can make it work for you, right? I mean, okay, yeah, you're going to have to eat a lot more vegetables, drink a lot more water, but this is not rocket science. This is not even revolutionary. Our grandmas have been suggesting this for how many generations? Eat your vegetables, drink more water, right? It's not really revolutionary, but it is in our modern world because we've been so accustomed to these highly addictive foods, by the way, which are designed to be addictive so that we are, lining more pockets for people. But yeah, well said.
Okay, so I want to answer this question, then I want to take a little bit of a turn before we continue on.
Sure.
So this was about the ketones, and I think that this may help. So first, Terry said, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I tried to come off of carbohydrates, but developed ketones and went into ketosis even though my glucose levels were normal. Any suggestions? And then said, I drink only distilled water and eat organic fruit and vegetables and fish. I don't eat meat, but I have not been using electrolytes. Thanks. So do you think the distilled water may be leaching the minerals from the body? And so something like that, maybe you need to add sea moss into your diet, some shilajit, some things that are going to actually give you a lot more minerals, especially if you are only drinking or add a little bit of salt to your distilled water to get some of those electrolytes, back. Or what's your thoughts on, what they just said?
I mean, you're so well versed in this stuff. It's really delightful. I mean, you're doing most of the conversation for me, but yes. So let me break down some of those parts of the question. I actually experimented with distilled water when I started to explore my hydration journey when first addressing the cancer. And I did not have any positive association with it whatsoever. I know there are some people who really swear by distilled water processes and protocols and stuff. I didn't find any benefit, and I stuck with it. I mean, it's a $300 investment basically for the machine. I even also had a water structurer. It would basically spin the water for intervals of 9 minutes, 18 or 27 minutes. Sometimes I would do it for 27 minutes. So like almost an hour and a half after distilling it and then spinning it and, putting it back in the fridge so that the temperature could be right to support the proper structure. And my body was still like, no. So I don't recommend distilled water personally. If you find it's working for you, I'm not going to deter anyone away from it. But I think there's also something to be said about a time and a place, So maybe for certain situations or issues, distilled water could be helpful. And then in certain other conditions, it won't be beneficial. And in this case, because this person wasn't focusing on mineralization, I think that's really, really key, because it so much comes down to, it's all about the micronutrients, right? The vitamins, the minerals, the enzymes that our bodies are, in most cases in the modern world, really devoid of. And if we're talking about pollution, a great other way to look at it, acid rain, right? We've heard about that forever. Well, that's because of pollution.
The 80s. That started in the 80s, I remember.
Yeah, because of all the pollution and the toxicity in the environment. Well, our bodies have to counteract all of the external pollutions as well. So if we don't have the minerals inside of our body, plus we're getting bombarded from the environment and our own food supply, everything just breaks down. Nothing's going to work properly in that sort of scenario. So, yes, I think absolutely, there are many cases, especially if your body is already devoid of minerals. I mean, okay, if you need to really flush out heavy metals and lots of toxicity, distilled water could benefit you in that sense. But if your body is devoid of minerals, it's going to hurt the body in that sense, right? It's not going to help remedy it. So recognizing that time and place is really important. Just listening to your body, again, cannot stress that enough, is super, super helpful. If you drink the water and you feel good about it, that's a good sign. Like, for instance, let's talk a little bit about the astrology. My sun sign placement, right? Because every planet has a placement in every sign, depending on your chart. My sun sign placement is Virgo, which is health and wellness. It's also food sensitivity. This is one of the reasons why Virgos are kind of infamous for being really fussy and nitpicky and judgy, right? Because there's a high level of sensitivity that they have. Actually, they are actually highly sensitive. And that's why they complain so much, because like, this is bothering me, or this is like, itchy on my skin, or, for me, for most of my life, water did nothing for me. I first started to notice something kind of cool or beneficial drinking vitamin water. This is like when I started to be healthy, like what, the US considers healthy. And I stopped drinking soda around 17 years old. And I started experimenting with vitamin water. I love that Virgo, I claim all the above. That's just how Virgo energy works. And vitamin water was one of the first drinks of my life where I drank it and I could actually feel like wetness inside my body. Like I could feel it penetrating into the tissues. I was like, whoa, this is weird. Like, how can I feel this? Well, because of the minerals, because of the electrolytes, it's vitamin water. The sugar in it is still problematic, and there's other chemicals there that are not good too. So I'm not recommending it as a health food. It's definitely healthier than soda, and maybe healthier than lots of waters, because at least there's some probably fake, processed vitamins, but at least maybe your body can absorb some of them, right? So
is this the 50 cent? Is this the 50 cent vitamin water that you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not actually here to promote it. I'm just saying that, I had this experience for the first time at that time where I could experience actual hydration. Now, never do you hear this anywhere that you can actually feel the water entering your body instantly the moment you swallow it. I mean, I could literally feel it locally, like diffusing.
spring water does that for us. So we drive an hour, we collect spring water. There's a website called findaspring.com where you can actually find spring water, real spring water that's closest to you. We get it right from the earth and drink it. And when I drink it, I can feel it just go through my body because it's real living water. We just drink it right from Mother Earth. Even if you get spring water out of a bottle, you don't know how long it's been in that bottle. You don't know if there's anything is leaching in that bottle, but as well as they're not allowed to sell any water unless it's radiated. So they have to, even spring water that you buy in a bottle, in a glass, if you're selling it. So how we knew that is because we didn't want to drive to go get some spring water. And so we looked at a local place that sold some spring water here. And we went and talked to the people, a smaller place. And we told them, I said, is this real spring water? And they're like, so it's straight from Mother Earth. Well, we have to put it through this radiation process to kill any bacterias in order for it to be sold, because this is kind of regulations. And we were like, wow. And so never again would we go there, because we're used to just drinking water straight from Mother Earth. We've been doing that for years and years and years. And like you said, we can actually feel the life of the water going into the body.
That's amazing. I love that story. And I love especially you bringing it back to, the true pure source, because I don't know. I think I can definitely count on one hand, if at all. I think there might've been maybe at least once, maybe if not twice, 2 times, where I had that experience just drinking water. Now, I do have that experience with things like celery juice or lemon water, right? Like actually feeling the penetration of my cells. But, one thing about that Virgo energy, because it's very perfectionistic oriented and like wanting to do the best all the time, but sometimes, perfect is the enemy of the good. So as much as I love that you told me that, although it was painful to learn that, because I didn't actually know that all water was irradiated.
Well, this is Canada. This is Alberta. This is our country, our province. I imagine it's universal for all places, but I can't say where you're from or where it is. All I know is that place that told us, they said they got regulations that it has to be radiated in order to be sold in a store.
I would be very surprised if it's not radiated in the US, because,
you're even worse than most other countries
exactly.
For your FDA and EPA and all this kind of crazy stuff. Your alphabet soup agencies are not for your health.
Yeah, no, I won't even, start with all that. It's just never ending. But yeah, but the point I wanted to mention is, even with that most likely radiated water, I didn't have that experience of like that deep hydration. I was buying, spring water in glass bottles. But it was vastly better than any other source of water I got at the time, right? So knowing that we don't have to be perfect all the time to find good, but we also want to do our best always, whenever we can. I think there was another place you wanted to go.
So this is, I want to take, before we continue on with, this great conversation about, the health and, stuff for hydration. You mentioned when you were 7, you had some thoughts of potentially, going to the other side and stuff. You had a lot of mental health issues, depression and stuff that you talked about in your early age. Is that based to maybe some childhood trauma that you went through? And the reason why I say that is because, even though you can change your diet, even though you can eat alkaline, even though you can do all these things and you can get noticeable, visible results in your body, then if you still have unresolved trauma or unresolved issues inside the body, somehow your body starts telling you and manifesting symptoms in other ways. So you could maybe cure, some of this, your cancers, but then if you still have unresolved issues that you haven't dealt with, then somehow you'll start manifesting other shoulder pains and other type of things maybe going through your body if you haven't really dealt with some of these unresolved issues. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about before we get on, because we can have all these great what to do with the body, but if you're not really balanced inside and you've got some trauma, then, even though you'll feel better, you still have these things that you still have to deal with.
I love your mode of conversation and just how awesome you're bringing back to points that I wanted to say that I forgot, or my own ADD, just like totally sidestep. So absolutely. And this is something that we could talk about more as a society, I think, and would really benefit from doing so, because Barbara Brennan would say, she does in one of her books, I think it's the first book, it's called Hands of Light, A Guide to Healing Through the Human Energy Field. So she talks about the aura, and anyone can learn how to do these things and develop these healing skills within themselves. That all from the perspective of a healer, all disease is psychosomatic. So that's not to invalidate people's physical conditions and saying that it's just in their head, but there is a very strong mental component that's not just mental either, because this is where we start to have to expand our minds a little bit and understand that everything is holistic, and that includes healing, and that includes our body, mind, spirit complex, whatever you want to call it. So if we're having to deal with something on a physical level, that does mean we also have to deal with it on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level too, right? And so as far as the depression and the trauma of my childhood years, I mean, yes, there was definitely lots of that growing up in New York City. Again, I mean, the neuroses is high here, and I was not an exception to that. So, but the environment aside, and I think there's also a really important point to say about past lives, if you buy into that sort of thing. If you don't, maybe you just want to talk about it from the perspective of your own personal soul's journey, right? We come here with specific tasks or goals or things that we want to learn or grow in and evolve into. And so, my soul journey definitely was meant to have these experiences. I know, I mean, it's not a question in my mind, but the ability to heal all of this had so much to do with addressing those deeper psychospiritual issues. And one of the other things I didn't mention about that initial cancer self-diagnosis that I discovered was the psychological, emotional, spiritual phenomenon that was also happening at the same time. So not just, the presence of me being able to identify cancer, but that there was deep emotional pain underneath it as well. And this is a little bit more personal. I don't usually like to go too public with this because it's often really not really anyone's business, in my opinion, and so many people can be really judgmental and just like project all their own stuff. But it's relevant to your question and to this narrative. So I'm going to share. I have an alternative sexuality, and my environment was not supportive of that at all. And to the point actually where when I experienced this healing process, kicking off with all this pain moving out of my body, the emotional component to it was deep, deep self-hate. It was just like, like that disgust that I was talking about earlier was actually like very personal. It was a self-disgust. It was like, ugh, like I can't even really put it into words so much because it's like more of a feeling realm or universe. And a lot of it was externalized. Some of it was internalized in my own relationship to my sexuality, but most of it was because of my environment and the messages and the messaging that I was getting about what that meant about me, my self-worth, because of my sexuality. And so when I started to see that and feel that and experience that, it was a huge component to the healing, because I had to let go of that belief, those feelings, those experiences, and that internalized hate to be able to heal as well. But the interesting thing was that the physical catalyzed the emotional in this case, right? Eventually, as I further progressed on the physical path, I absolutely hit barriers and walls with my healing process if I wasn't doing the trauma release work. And so I should mention there were other things, I used every tool available to me at the time. I mean, obviously none of them would have worked if I was still pumping my body full of sugar and toxins, right? So, but I was doing acupuncture, I was doing yoga, I was doing breath work, I was exercising, I was, taking steam showers. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I was also doing gratitude meditations. And I really started to experience profound healing when I was able to get into the space of gratitude for the cancer. And I know that sounds wonky or crazy and almost impossible for some people. I mean, it would have been, in my mind at the beginning of that process, impossible to think that I could be grateful for it, right? But in the end, and especially now, I'm super grateful for it. And the gratitude was the final catalyst to complete the healing, because there was so much resentment I had about having it. It was like, why me? Can't, and that was keeping me stuck. That was keeping the cancer stuck in my body. It was not helping at all. And surprisingly enough, gratitude is one of my most favorite practices. I've been doing it basically since my early 20s, but keeping up with it every day, not so easy. Some days it's really hard to feel grateful for certain things. I mean, so during that process, that was as true as ever. But at the same time, when I do it and I am able to really go deep into it, that is to say, like, I'll sit in darkness in the room or in quiet, with some music in my ears and headphones, and or without, sometimes, and just say, thank you over and over for like 30 minutes, sometimes 3 hours, if I'm really getting deep into it. And not just saying it, but actually generating it, choosing to feel it in the moment for anything I can think of or nothing at all, just feeling it in my body. And after, a good focus without any distraction, my mind's really cultivating, and my mind and body and heart are cultivating that experience and vibration of gratitude. 20, 30 minutes or more in, I start having trauma release. Like, I'll start crying, and like inexplicably, like out of gratitude, I start crying, and then it's like sadness, but then it comes back to gratitude. And it's like this interesting thing, but that was a huge component to the healing as well. And that's something that I don't share as often because it's, again, a little bit more woo, but obviously your audience can handle this kind of information. So I'm happy to go there. Absolutely. I mean, there are some people who say, and I honestly didn't even know as much about trauma and as an access to healing or a requirement to healing as I did then that I do now. But I almost kind of wish that I had discovered about trauma release and trauma healing first and foremost at the beginning of my healing process, because I feel like I might have fast tracked so much of this. Because if you can trauma release, EMDR, tapping, anything that shakes the body, crying, laughing, also, like, it's about getting the stored energy, emotional energy, mental energy in the nervous system out. And your body, your cells, there's cell memory, there's muscle memory, right? So getting the trauma out is absolutely a requirement to be able to access and claim full healing.
Yeah, many years ago, I was listening to an ophthalmologist, and he was also a naturopath, and he was speaking in a conference in front of a bunch of medical doctors. And he was saying, I'm putting on my naturopath hat on right now. And he was saying that most of these illnesses and diseases are manifestations of some kind of childhood trauma. And he's speaking to medical doctors in a big conference, and he's telling them that. And it says a lot of this stuff is stuck energy. So again, you can eat all of the best foods, you can get rid of a lot of symptoms, but stuff will still pop up, if you have stuff, unresolved issues, because it's your body's way of telling you there's stuff you need to deal with in order for you to find. So we need to put better foods into our body anyways, the way they put toxins and the wheat bellies and all that kind of stuff that's out there, genetically modified foods and pesticides and all of this dead food, middle aisles, that's anybody and everybody. It's not a no-brainer that if you want better health, choose better things to put into your body, whatever that may be. Even if it's meats, I don't eat meats, but even if it's meat, then find the organic stuff, find stuff that's grass-fed, not slaughter-killed, stuff they feed with genetically modified corn and soy and things that cows aren't even supposed to eat. Stay away from those type of things if you are, looking for better health. But it's a balance, because this thing, when people are saying the dark night of the soul or go look within, a lot of this message is really floating on around out there, is because most people have been traumatized in one way or another through their childhood, whether it's through families, whether it's through bullying, whether it's through, experiences that, that's severely traumatic that's happened, to people. And as well as they promote trauma in everything in the media, the mind, everything is about division. It's about trauma. It's about turning on who's all the killings that's going on. And then we have this warmongering global mentality of world dominance that's, that trauma is passed upon the people as well. So it's hard to live a balanced life without having to really balance yourself, because there's so much external chaos and craziness out there that healing really comes within. And once you can find that peace and that harmony within yourself, then making these better decisions will really flourish on these choices that you do make for your body.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, well said. I mean, you could teach my classes. You're very, very well educated on all of this stuff. So yeah, no, trauma and trauma release and healing, we have to look at it holistically. right? There is a spiritual purpose behind this stuff too. And so, Barbara Brennan is big about this. There's also another author who's just amazing. I don't know if you've heard anything about James Redfield and the Celestine Prophecy and subsequent books. I mean, that guy is so ahead of his time. I'm listening to the second book, The 10th Insight, again on audio, just like over and over and over again, because it's just so rich in information. And he talks a lot about this too, that we have a birth vision, basically like an ideal vision for being incarnated and born into this lifetime. And that where Barbara Brennan would also agree with this statement very strongly, where he also says it in the 10th Insight book, that when we go off our life path, or we forget, our purpose for being here, our birth vision, as he calls it, that's when illness comes, right? So it's like losing ourselves, forgetting ourselves will cause illness in the body, and remembering ourselves, or going back on our path and not giving into our fear, but actually, doing that whole hero's journey of living up to our full potential. That's also how we access our healing. And so, yeah, integrative. It has to be holistic. We have to consider mind, body, and soul connection. They're all connected. And if you're just looking at it from one side, it's going to be, an imbalanced wheel. It's just going to go in a circle. It's not going anywhere.
How about religious? Are you religious at all? Have you delved into it? Have you had experiences with it at a younger age? Like, what's your thoughts on religion opposed to spirituality, opposed to atheism?
Okay. Yeah, definitely not an atheist. I mean, there was a little bit of a time where I might have lost my faith because of the circumstances of my life, but I always felt that there was some kind of higher power. So at worst, I might have said I was agnostic, if you want to call that worst. Religious? No, never. I mean, I am very interested in all different kinds of religions. If anything, there's something called omnism, which believes that it's not about like one religion, but that each religion has truth in it. That's more where I hang out. I don't particularly have any like anti-religion stance, like this particular religion is like no, bad or evil. But I do think that they all have the pitfall of dogma, where people think, my God's better than your God, and I'm going to kill you over it, sort of thing, which is a big problem in my opinion. So that always turned me off. And especially, the way a lot of people use religion as a weapon for social dominance and to, manipulate their environment because it makes them feel more secure. Also not a big fan of that. But yeah, I mean, I love all the religions in the sense where I think if you find someone who is really embodying the truth of their particular religion, you can find so many amazing things about any religion. Like, it was just after September 11th, and I met for the first time in person. I mean, I was pretty young. I just turned 18 at that time, a Muslim. And, it was like big no-no in the US, especially in New York, where I was at the time, where, 9/11 happened. There's like all this fear mongering around the whole Muslim religion and every potential Muslim. It was just like, but this man, he shared things with me from the Quran that were just so beautiful and wise. I was like, that's awesome. Like, I have no problems with any of that. So anyone wants to share any sort of universal truth with me, I'm going to be open to receive it. So yeah, I think all religions can be beautiful, but it depends. Is the person actually using it with their heart, or are they using it with their mind? And so that's the big difference for me.
What about you experiencing some maybe hate in your life, opposed to some religious hate, doing yoga and, some of these different things, saying that this is just wrong and you're opening portals to demons and, like some weird stuff that they try to project their fears upon you. You're finding balance and harmony, yet people are trying to project their fear upon you, trying to make you be afraid or change what you're doing. Have you experienced that throughout your journey?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's back to that dogma stuff, and you can be an atheist and be dogmatic too. I don't think, the religious people seem to have, especially like that, I don't know, the zealots. It's not even about religious so much as like the zealot religious people. Some of the stuff they come up with, I mean, the fear mongering is so low. I mean, the first time I heard someone call yoga satanic, I couldn't believe it. I was like, are you kidding me? Yoga is the opposite of satanic. Yoga is about practical methodology to activate your own divine spark inside. That is the whole purpose of yoga. Yoga literally means union. That is the word, Sanskrit translation. You could call it yoke or to bring together, right? To unite, same thing. And so it's about union with God. That's what yoga means, right? So for someone to say that it's satanic, I think is just one of the most absurd things I've ever heard on the topic. But given the threat that it creates and poses to the religious dogma hegemony, right? They have all this power and they don't want to let it go. So of course, they're going to demonize things like astrology and yoga and meditation and breath work. I mean, how can you possibly demonize breath work? It's just like, no, don't breathe. Don't do it.
Don't balance yourself. Don't quiet your mind. Don't do all these. Don't stretch. Don't do all these healthy healing things. And they feel righteous in their, in their dogma and their hate towards these certain things. And it's really sad when there's people that you care about, but yet they have these such blinders on, or these such stuck beliefs that they feel that just stretching or breathing or, looking up at the stars could be like negative in any way. And that makes me sad that there are a lot of people, especially ones that are in my life that I care about, that do still have those blocks on. But I'm very open. I listen to everybody and I, accept them for who they are, where they're at. I don't try to change people. I just try to lead by example. And hence why we have this show, just to bring people from all walks of life to maybe help further people in their development of who and what they are and, what they believe is to be true and righteous.
Yeah, it is very sad. I agree with you there wholeheartedly. And I think it might be helpful for some of us who, I myself still struggle with not getting too affected by those kinds of interactions. It depends, obviously the closer they are to me, the more it's going to affect me, right? Naturally. But people who do that sort of stuff, they're really just living in fear. Or at the very least, that communication, that comment is coming from a place of fear, because obviously it's not logical. and it's just like they're afraid of themselves, I would say, their own divine spark. I would say more than likely, they're afraid of their own pain. And, you might call it karma. I don't love that word so much in the sense that people have an automatic negative connotation to it. It's more like our spiritual work, or, the cause and consequences of our previous actions and thoughts and feelings. So if someone has been disconnected from their spirit and ignoring the messages from their higher self or the divine and living in a fear-based, controlling, war-like personality or mindset, they're going to be causing a lot of pain, and not just to others, of course, but to themselves. Every time they cause someone else pain, they're causing themselves pain too. They might not realize it because they're so cut off from that true self. But that's why the only way to really address abuse is to stop it first, right? No one is benefited by enabling an abuser to continue abusing or excusing their abuse, because the abuser themselves abuses themselves first every time they abuse someone else, right? So yeah, they're abusing everyone else, but they're also getting abused by themselves every time they abuse someone else, right? Because of that natural connection that we all have. So for someone who's connected, is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I hurt you. I feel so bad, right? But for people who are disconnected, it's like, no, I didn't hurt you. I'm right, you're wrong. Right. So there's this hard shell of ego that doesn't want to know the truth. It doesn't want to hear the truth because it doesn't want to have to deal with and process all that internal pain. It's much easier to just say, no, you're the reason and you're the one who's in pain. You need to deal. I'm perfect. I'm fine. I don't need your help. And so, compassion is super helpful, not idiot compassion where, you just let people be abusive, compassion with wisdom and boundaries to say, I love you. I'm not going to stay here for this abuse. And I wish better for us both, but, I'm here for you. If you want to have a loving conversation about it, I'm open to that, something along those lines.
So what else did you want to maybe chat about here today that, you wanted to, because, you've definitely got lots of words of wisdom and we like hearing you.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, if there are any other questions that anyone had that, we didn't get a chance to answer, I'd be happy to answer those first. I can certainly think of lots more to say because I have a big mouth and I like to talk. But yeah, I could certainly talk a little bit more about astrology and my upcoming course.
Yeah, that's astrology. So I'm not sure if you've gotten to listen to Micah Dank, who we've had here on the Missing Link. He is from the States and he's an astrotheologist.
Ooh, cool.
And so he's dissected a lot of religious scriptures, including the Bible, and he believes it's all based on astrology. So
Mhm.
he actually shows the connection, which each and every single one of the signs and through different works in his teachings and stuff. So I thought that would be for someone, that's into astrology, that type of teachings would definitely resonate for someone that's in that, because if you're into the religious teachings, you're against the astrology. And I think that that's important to talk about, because if a lot of their scriptures are astrology based and they want people contained into a certain program, then they're going to demonize astrology because they don't want people making that connection, because then it makes a lot of their fear-based programming irrelevant, and then they don't have as much control over the person if you have that open, expanded worldly view, especially through the signs and the stars that God created for us.
You nailed it. I can't even add anything to that, I don't think. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in most cases, I see too many. I don't know if it's the majority, but too many people using religion as a means for control. I mean, even Constantine, right? The Emperor Constantine, who started Christianity. Now, there's truth in all religions. I mean, the teachings of Jesus, I think, are almost untouchable, right? Just how full of truth they are, right? So I'm not going to take any issue with that. But it also, I think, would be really unwise to overlook the fact that the intent of the religion was made as a means of social control, right? So if you're just going to assume that everything there is complete gospel and that there's no potential for the corruptions of man to get in there, I think it's a fantasy perspective and not understanding the material world that we live in. Yes, God is ever present, but there are people who choose not to be connected to that energy and choose to work in opposition to it. And I don't think Constantine is I don't think we can find a better example than Constantine. So yes, they fear monger the things that threaten their domination and control. And they don't want people really to be liberated. They want people to be dependent on the church and give money to the church so it can be this power structure they control. I mean, God, how much money does the Catholic Church have? I mean, let's not even talk about all the child rape that, people still overlook, right? As if, oh yeah, that's not important. Sure, just overlook it, keep tithing. Yeah, okay, thanks. So with astrology, I mean, the Star of Bethlehem, it's three kings, it's all over. It's all over the Bible, and it's all over ancient traditions. I bet you there's, I can't even give great examples. I would love to see more from this astrotheologist you spoke about. So feel free to send me any links. But basically, anything that encourages power within is demonized in the current power structure. I think it's that simple.
Yeah, whether it's the medical, whether it's the spiritual, whether it's, financial, anything, it's basically, they want people can root it into that control. So Lori was asking what your age is. I'm guessing around maybe 39, 40.
You nailed it. Yeah, I'm actually 39. I'll be 40 in a couple of weeks. Not even. Yeah, September 12th is my birthday. So in 12 days, I'll be 40.
September 12th, you're turning 40. In 2 months, I'm turning 50.
Oh, wow. Well, you look great. So, keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, man. I just went through a double hip replacement surgery. So I've had some challenges less than about 6 months ago. So we're healing, we're getting better, feeling good, starting to feel stronger, less pain. So hopefully doing something right.
Yeah, it's delightful to read. Hear, and I'm not surprised with all your amazing wisdom in general and knowledge. So yeah, keep up the good work there.
So what do you do for astrology? How do you help people? Is this something you do as a service? If someone wanted to reach out to you and get like a chart reading, or how does that work?
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about that. And I actually also use astrology in my course as well, because there is a branch of astrology called medical astrology. Super fascinating and interesting. I mean, and supportive and practical. And so in general, though, my focus is on soul readings, right? Giving people some context for their soul's journey in this lifetime. We have something in astrology called the South and North Node, and it speaks to the trajectory of our soul's evolution. So again, if you don't like the idea of past lives, you can just think of it as your past in this lifetime and your future's intention. Your soul came in to be here. It had a purpose. And so a lot of people can get really profound insight just on the direction in their life. It's like, well, what's my purpose in this lifetime? What am I meant to do? The nodes of the moon will tell us that, and our skills, our gifts, as well as our pitfalls. This one of the biggest questions I have for my clients for astrology is, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? What are my gifts? How do I use them? Those kinds of things. A lot of times also, one of the biggest questions people have with astrology is about relationships, which has been happening a lot lately, especially because we currently have Venus retrograde. So retrograde is actually pretty simple. Everyone talks about it with Mercury. It's very common. Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year. So that's why we hear about it so often. People calling it Mercury Gatorade, Mercury and Gatorade. But it's actually really simple. It's like if you're driving on the highway and you see the car next to you, it looks like it's the same speed, right? And then you go faster than it and it looks like it's going backwards. But the car doesn't go backwards, right? It looks like the cars are going backwards. It's just a relative motion. And so it's the same thing with the planets. Mercury is apparently going backwards in the sky when it's retrograde, but it's not. It's just the relative motion of everything. But it matters when those planets go retrograde because there is an energetic phenomenon with that where the forward motion of the planets is like the yang fire energy, where it's, directed forward. And the retrograde energy of the planet is like the yin feminine, where it's drawing inward, right? So whenever a planet's retrograde, there's a need or an energetic in the environment to go within, take it a little bit slower, reassess, revisit, revise, right? So whenever any particular planet is retrograde, that planet's energy is more withdrawn and inviting us to go within and reassess. And so because Venus is retrograde now, she's going to be retrograde just for another 4 or 5 days. But lots of people have been having relationship stuff show up. Right. It's just like, it's not just relationships. Venus also rules any sort of thing we value, also our money and finances, right? Material possessions, our body, and the things that we value in our relationships too. So that has been a big thing on everyone's mind recently, of course, with this current energy, and a big question that's been coming up for a lot of my clients this time. And it's funny when you see this stuff and it's like, oh yeah, of course people are having relationship drama right now. I mean, and that's not to say it only has to show up in those cases, but when Mercury is going retrograde and you have a particular day where like everything is not working, your phone's not working, your computer's not working, the train is late, the red light's gone out, someone had an accident, and it's all happening right as Mercury goes retrograde, you're like, okay, this is not a coincidence. Like, and you can even account for it. So one good thing, like for instance, because I know a lot of people struggle with Mercury retrograde, usually people struggle because they're trying to push against the current. If you think about it like a wave, right? It's like an energy wave. If you're at the beach and the undertow is pulling you back, right? That's like the yin energy of the planet. It's like, oh, no, you're not going anywhere yet. But then eventually, if you're staying with that same current, it will come back and push you forward towards the shore, right? So that's when the planet goes direct. So you're not going to try and struggle against a current when it's pulling you back. You can just wait, hang out until it's going forward. And you're like, all right, I'll go along with it. And it's much easier, right? So when we find a Mercury retrograde or any planet retrograde, it's like, don't try and push against that energy. Just go with the flow, maybe take a little slower. And with Mercury in particular, in all the retrogrades, Venus, especially the inner planets, Venus, Mars, Mercury, we tend to feel them more intensely. So it's a really great time with that planet's energy to not rush or push anything. Just allow things to unfold. And especially with Mercury retrograde, give yourself extra time. Try not to rush. If you know it's Mercury retrograde, plan to be there 20 minutes early, and you'll probably get there on time, right? So that's the kind of thing, we can work with this stuff, and it doesn't have to be deterministic in the sense like, oh, the stars said this, so I'm a victim of the stars. No, that's not how it works either. It's raining outside. Are you going to take an umbrella or not? And if you check the forecast, it's raining. Well, yeah, you're going to bring an umbrella. Well, if you know it's Mercury retrograde, yeah, leave a little early, right? It's the same idea. We're working with energies. It's not predeterministic. We do still have free will, but the environment also matters. So I do 90-minute astrology readings on average, but I'm able to do like smaller readings for people if they prefer just like a quick check-in or something along those lines. And you can feel free to contact me through my website on rawlifeyoga.com. to set up a session, or just email me info@rawlifeyoga.com. And yeah, I mean, I really am excited also. I'm always super excited to share an astrology with all my clients. It was amazing for me, the idea that I could get paid to talk about something that I'm so passionate about. So, thank you, God, and Goddess and the universe for that. But I also love health and wellness and bridging that with astrology and medical astrology, and using that as one of the tools to guide my clients and students through my course is just so valuable, because it can really get into some of the details about our own makeup, our energetic makeup, that can help support the healing process. So I'll give you an example from my own chart. So my sun sign and Mercury are both in Virgo, which is very health oriented, but I have a ton of other planets. My moon, Jupiter, Uranus, South Node, and Neptune are all in Sagittarius. So super, super Sag. Like, I'm way more Sag than I am Virgo. And then I have my Mars and Venus in Leo, and that's 7 placements of fire, right? In the element of fire. Leo's a fire sign, Sag is a fire sign. So super fiery. You can see it in my energy. You can even see it in the way I talk. It's all over the place, right? So, it's part of my personality, but one of the things that medical astrology helped me to discover about myself and my own healing process, which makes a lot of sense with the dehydration and the inflammation that I was experiencing for many years, the itching and stuff. Too much fire, right? Too much fire. I needed to ground that fire down. Putting the fire into earth, getting grounded, is a great way to combat fire. And also hydrate more, right? Balance out that fire with a little bit more water. And just having that context helps to laser focus and get certain detailed information that we might not have seen otherwise without that medical astrology information. Fun fact, I'll say, like, the last thing I'll say about this, Hippocrates, who's the father of modern medicine, right? He says, I'm going to paraphrase his quote here: a physician without knowledge of astrology is no physician at all.
Wow.
So the founder of modern medicine that we hail and extol as the best thing in the world was a medical astrologer. So much so that he said, you're not even a physician if you don't have this basic knowledge. And it's super helpful to also talk about the soul context and the soul evolution as it relates to the health and healing too. So big, powerful stuff there.
Well, fascinating name, because the modern medicine is very hypocritical, coming from Hippocrates. So what a association to that. So I did want to ask you about the moon. So last night, right now, I guess we have this super blue moon. What is that, and how does that affect people? I know before we started, you said you couldn't even sleep last night. So you're running on fumes here, I guess, without any sleep. But how does that affect you? How does that affect people? And what is this, super blue moon that we are having right now?
Sure. Yeah. So let's first break down the terminology: super and blue. It's a super moon because the moon's orbit around the Earth is not an exact circle, right? It's a little bit elliptical. So it varies in its distance. There are some places where the moon will be farther away from the Earth, and some places where it'll be even closer. And so that's where it's super. It's a super moon when the moon is actually closer in its orbit to the Earth. And so it even appears a little bit bigger. It is actually closer. So that's the super part. It's a blue moon, not in color, but they just call it a blue moon when it's the second full moon in the same month. So that's what the blue moon means. And it's taking place today. I mean, it peaked, I don't know, maybe like 8 hours ago or so. But it's also happening right with Saturn, the planet Saturn. If you're doing Western astrology, it's in the sign of Pisces. If you're doing Vedic or sidereal, it's in the sign of Aquarius. But for sure, both the moon and Saturn are in the same sign in the zodiac, right? So whichever sign you're looking at it from, they're both in the same position. And so Saturn is, well, let's talk about more of the moon first before we get into Saturn or even the sign placement. So I mentioned at the beginning of us getting on the video here that the full moon is very phenomenological. I feel like I'm making up a word there.
I love made up words.
Me too. Yeah, that's my favorite thing about English by far. So there are more 911 calls, emergency room visits, pregnancy deliveries, and tons of other stuff documented at the full moon more than any other time of the month, right? So this is solid concrete evidence that we can have to understand that these celestial bodies have a gravitational pull and effect on our own systems. It's not really a stretch of logic if you consider how the moon pulls the tides of our planet and how our bodies are mostly water, right? So that's why people go crazy during the full moon, more so than they would during a new moon, for instance. With the full moon, the energy is stronger because the effect of the gravity of the moon is stronger. And so we can feel things more strongly. We tend to have more clarity, or at least, things become more obvious, right? Our feelings, because the moon is associated with our feelings in astrology. And of course, our water in our body relates to feelings, right? Emotion and water, energy and motion, that sort of thing. So it will tend to bring up deeper feelings that maybe weren't clear before the full moon and illuminate them. That's part of the illumination that we see with the full moon. Lots of other things. I mean, insomnia during full moons is also a pretty common occurrence. I wouldn't say for everybody, but if you're inclined towards it like I am, then yeah. I mean, I also mentioned at the beginning of the call, I have more insomniatic episodes during the full moon than any other time. And it was actually when I started to really get into astrology. I was studying it for a few years before I started to notice this. But when I moved back to New York to heal my cancer, I started noticing a pattern with my insomnia that it was happening with the full moon. So I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, I was even able to feel the energies from the environment and the placement of the moon and stuff like this. So, full moons have lots of different things. Obviously it's also related to women's cycles, right? So it also affects the water in women's bodies and in their womb and things like that. It's even something that you see a lot in astrology where the woman's moon sign placement. So for me, I was born with the moon in Sagittarius. Well, everyone has a moon placement as well as their sun placement. Most people only know about their sun placement, but the moon is also very important. It's just as important as the sun, actually. And depending on what sign their moon is in, that's going to be likely or approximately where the moon will be when they have their cycle. So if the woman has a moon in Sagittarius, not always exactly, because there's some fluctuations, but she'll often have her cycle when the moon is in Sagittarius. So there's lots of ways that the moon can affect us and influence us, but emotionally, heightened energy, it's also really great for culmination of projects. If you think about it on a physical, material level, farmers use the cycles of the moon for their crops. They plant seeds at the new moon, and then, the full moon is when there's more of a fruition. So we can also use that energetically and metaphysically in our own life. I mean, we can see it in our own consciousness, but it also can be used as a tool to, plant certain seeds of consciousness or action at the new moon and find them culminating by the full moon, right? So this is another way that we can actively work with the energies of our environment for greater effect. Now, this particular moon, I'm going to talk about Western astrology because I am a Western astrologer. I also study Vedic and the other disciplines as well, but my training is in Western, so I'll stay focused to there. In Western astrology, the full super blue moon, is in Pisces, the sign of Pisces, which has to do with Neptune and spirituality and dreams and visions and these kinds of things, right? Compassion. And so Saturn is also there in Pisces currently and will be there for another year and a half or 2 years about. It's a slower moving planet. It takes 30 years to make a revolution, right? Where the moon takes about 30 days. And so with Saturn moving through Pisces, we are finding Saturn's energy of structure, duty, responsibility, trimming the fat, right? That's that Capricorn energy of doing our best and being responsible. It's calling us to bring that diligent energy into the spiritual realms, the sign of Pisces, right? That rules spirituality. So we're also seeing that with religion, with spirituality, there is this higher energy coming in that wants us to be more discerning around our spiritual discipline. And it's going to be a long process for that, right? But with the moon and Saturn coming together, well, that's magnifying that effect, right? Happening in Pisces. And especially because the moon was full, it magnifies it even more. So I wrote a post about this on my Facebook yesterday. Let me actually look it up so that I don't misquote myself, because I said it right and I don't want to miss anything. But Yeah. Hold on one second. Just bear with me.
And I'm not sure if you mentioned, but I believe it's called the super blue moon. Super meaning two full moons in the same month. That's why they say it's super.
No,
At the beginning of the month, it
that's the
was a
blue
full
part.
moon. Pardon? That's the blue part. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, so the with the full super and blue moon in Pisces today, being with Saturn, it's a great time to envision the ideal structure, Saturn, for our spirit, Pisces, to manifest the stuff that our dreams are made of, right? Like our dreams come true, why our spirit came here. So this is something that maybe people have been experiencing. I certainly had a lot of really powerful manifestations show up in the past 12 hours alone related to work, spiritual work, opportunities with spiritual work, and living that spiritual dream life come true sort of thing, right? I mean, I would even say, although I knew that the full moon was coming, and I did schedule this call with you for that reason in part, but I didn't realize just how perfectly timed it was going to be and all the manifestations that were going to show up. So, and this is just one potential expression of the manifestations of this full moon. There are, I don't want to say infinite, but so many, countless perhaps, ways that these energies could manifest for us individually. And that's where our own awareness of our personal natal chart, right? Natal as in when we were born and what was happening in the sky story at that moment of our birth. When we understand our own personal chart, it really brings all of this stuff out from the conceptual into the real, and understanding like, well, if you have something in Pisces, for instance, if you're a Pisces sun, moon, rising, etc., or have any planets in Pisces, you'll feel this full moon more strongly than someone who doesn't. Or also Virgo, because Virgo is a sign opposite Pisces, right? And that's a connection. Even though they're opposite, there's going to be an energy exchange between them. So knowing your own chart, you can even find out these things. If you don't want to pay for a professional service, you can find tons of free resources online, Cafe Astrology, the pattern, it goes on and on, to find out the basics and even, get some good information about your chart. Of course, there's no substitution for a living, trained person, because those programs are limited in that they're not as personalized. But I highly cannot, one of the reasons why I started doing astrology was because of the profound effect it had in supporting me in guiding my own life path, where I used to struggle with, purpose and timing and context for my spiritual journey. This contextualized it all. So it's like, oh, wow, I'm having like this super anxious day. It's a full moon and I can't sleep. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? As opposed to just like thinking that there was something wrong with me, when it was more something going on in the environment. So I cannot recommend the study of astrology enough for people who have any inclination towards it. It will continue to blow your mind if you continue to remain open to it.
Now, with this 2 moons in 1 month, is this probably not natural? Because didn't they change the calendar? Aren't we supposed to have only 28 days in a month? Aren't we supposed to follow like a 13-month calendar where like the woman's cycle is 28 days? That's how our calendar is supposed to be. So things are really a little bit off timing as it is. And then my question to that, if that's true, then how does that change potentially how astrology may be? Because of when people were born may not be at the same astrological time as they say, because things are a little bit different when it comes to, our actual dates, because of this 12-month calendar that was adopted, I think, in the 1400s, the Gregorian calendar that they changed it from.
I love your questions. Yeah. And again, your vast wealth of knowledge about all this stuff. But yeah, so I would say, more than likely that's the case. I'm not going to argue or dispute that, because, we've been lied to about so many things, and there's been so many contrivances and control systems set up to disempower us. That would not surprise me in the least. Also, I'm not super ready to jump on any bandwagon that just wants to refute everything, because that could just be another form of control and confusion. So, who knows what's really going on with the calendars, unless you were there. Even then, like, okay, maybe if I have a past life memory, and you're certain about it. But yes, all likelihood, the calendar has been manipulated, and yet things still work. And I'm going to give this example because if we're just talking about Western astrology, there's probably dozens, if not hundreds, of different kinds of Western astrology. And if we're talking about Vedic astrology, equally, there are hundreds of different kinds of Vedic astrology. Okay. And then there are even other kinds of astrology beyond those two, right? That don't fall in. There's Arabic, there's this, there's, you know, it goes on and on. And what's ironic, you know, maybe you might expect, because there might be a little bit more spiritual evolution without so much binding dogma. I guess not. I don't know, because pretty much most, I don't want to generalize, but generalizations can be useful sometimes. Almost every astrologer that I meet, not my closest colleagues, because, you know, I like to keep people who are open-minded in my inner circle, but almost every astrologer that I've come across thinks that they have the exclusive path to truth. No, mine is the best. Yours is wrong. Mine is the best. I had someone tell me that Western astrology was the fake news of astrology. And, you know,
sounds like another religious-based thought process where theirs is the best, opposed to, you know, everybody has some truths in it where we can learn from everybody, opposed to, you know, the ego getting involved where I'm right and everybody else is wrong. Is such a weird, you know, concept, because everybody is the center of their own universe. So, you know, what's right for one may not be right for all.
Yeah, you know, you nailed it. It's definitely ego, and, you know, it's an insecurity thing. People need to feel in control because they deeply feel out of control. And I get that, you know, I'm there too sometimes myself, but not with things like astrology or learning in general. I love learning. So I tend to have a pretty open-minded. That's not to say that I can't be judgmental or closed-minded. I have that part of me as well, but it's minuscule compared to the part of me that genuinely wants to learn and is open to new information. So, you know, I still have to be vigilant about that, you know, part of me that thinks it knows better and can be arrogant and all that stuff. But I am at least willing to look at it. And, you know, if someone points it out to me and it's authentic, yeah, I'll course correct, no problem. Now, with the astrological dogma and stuff, because, yeah, I mean, spiritual ego is like the biggest ego on the planet. You know, any religious, you can call it religious, doesn't matter where it's coming from. People who think that they have the one inline track to God are some of the most insufferable people, in my opinion and experience. And so, yeah, it happens with astrology too. But the point I was making to answer your question is that, okay, I started to learn about Vedic astrology. And basically the difference between Western and Vedic is, and this is a very, very big generalization, but it's got some good wisdom in it. The whole zodiac is basically kind of set back about 25 degrees. So in Western, you know, each sign has 30 degrees, you know, 12 signs, 360 degrees. But so where it's an example, my Western chart, my sun is in Virgo, but in my Vedic, it's in Leo, right? Because the whole thing shifts back about 25 degrees. So I'd been into Western astrology for many years before I started to explore and study Vedic. But when I first started to go into it, I was amazed at just how amazingly, unbelievably accurate it also was. Right? It's like, wait a minute. So two things can be true. Like, that's basically what it comes down to, right? And so I was able to keep my mind open and just hold both of the perspectives at the same time. And I still do. I mean, I'm still Western based, but I still consider my Vedic chart and even the sidereal one. There's also galactic astrology, which I recently started to learn more about, which is actually constellation based. So for instance, if you're going to look now, and this relates to your question, if you're going to look now and you get one of these little star map apps on your phone, right? And you look at what constellation the moon is in, it would be in, I think it would be in like Aquarius instead of Pisces, right? It's closer to the sidereal or also Vedic. Vedic is not exactly constellation, but it's closer. And so when I first saw that, I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. But what's still amazing is that the system still works despite that. So why that's changed? Originally, the system was constellation based, but because of what we call the precession of the equinoxes, the constellations shift, they move. They're not static. You know, the whole universe is alive. So over the course of thousands of years, there's a little bit of a drift. And so that's why, you know, Western astrology is no longer constellation based. Thousands of years ago, it was, right? So, but yet it still works. Now, there are some people who would say that it works because so many people believe in it, but I don't think that's the only thing that's happening. I know that belief, predates reality, and mind predates materiality and all that stuff. So I'm not discounting that at all, but I am suggesting that there's something more going on. So to your question about the Gregorian calendar, I've heard about that. I don't doubt it. I know, again, the corruptions of the Catholic Church are innumerable. So yeah, I'm sure they mess with stuff. But at the same time, there are so many synchronicities that show up even inside of that calendar that also show up with astrology, like just numerologically, right? Like on a 8/22 or even 8/8 or, whatever, like these certain dates and certain timings that show up with those dates where it's just like, it's mind boggling. So I guess I don't really have a complete answer for you in saying like, this is the one way, or this is the only right way, or this is the one, calendar or ideal calendar moving from 13 to 12. Like, I don't really know, but somehow, some way, it still works and it still fits. And the proof is in the pudding, because you can still get the results that you're looking for by using that system, even though it might not fit into maybe a more natural structure. I don't know enough about constellation-based astrology. It's way more complicated actually than the Western one, because Western is more evenly distributed and basically easier to learn. I'd say it's more like a beginner's place to start astrology. I would not recommend for beginners to go to galactic astrology, because it's just way too much information, way too much nuance, and it would be overwhelming. But I promise you this, I will learn more about it as I continue to deepen my studies on astrology, and maybe be able to answer that question better of how not only two things can be true, but three or possibly more than three things at once can all be true at the same time, and how that somehow still fits in with that Gregorian calendar.
I'm not sure how, but for me, I see it's the magic of the universe that makes it fit. Joseph says the Hebrew calendar is aligned to that with, I think, the 13-month calendar.
Yes, I've
I
heard
think,
that. Yeah. And I think also the Chinese New Year is related to that too.
yeah, and I think that with this 13-12 month, it's just another way for them to get us a little bit off of balance, instead of being in balance. And I think that we need to get back to that 28-day, 13-month calendar. I think that that's something that we will, progress to. But for me, I didn't know nothing about astrology, knew nothing about any of this stuff. And someone had told me, I think a little bit about my Scorpio. And so I wanted to read about it. And I don't know, I was like 18 or 19 years old. And I bought this book called Sun, Moon, and the Planet Stars. And I started to read, and every single thing I read about Scorpio, me, I'm born on October 26th, everything that I read was 100% bang on. I could not believe what I was reading in this book. The only thing that it says, I don't like to compliment and I don't like to receive compliments. That's the only thing that it said that I wasn't in alignment with.
Mm-hmm.
But every other word, there wasn't one other word in that whole thing. And for me, whether this is off balance or not, and like I said, maybe the magic of the universe, how somehow this still works, even though they try to get us off, bump us off our path, the universe brings us back, and, it just kind of puts us back into alignment of what we are and what we need to learn, and, who we are. And some of this astrological stuff really has helped a lot of people through their journeys, learning about different things, what are, likes and not likes, what are good things, different traits. And, for people to say that it's not healthy or it's satanic or any of these weird things that they say, again, I think it's more of a closed mind, because I've seen how it has benefited many people just to find out more about what they are based on, their birth charts.
Yeah, I mean, well said. I'd be very curious to see your whole chart, because the sun placement is just one piece of the puzzle. So you might even have more than one thing in Scorpio, but you probably also have some.
I have three Scorpio. I think I've got three, or Angeline knows about it. I'm Scorpio Sun, Scorpio Moon, Scorpio something, and then I believe she says I had Virgo in it. Like I said, I'm not really like the astrologer stuff. That's not. I just find it very fascinating. I've never delved deep into it. I've had quite a few different readings from people, which it's all pretty bang on. But I it's never been like, I have a lot more pressing things that I've been having on my mind opposed to just the astrology stuff. But I really like, hearing different people's interpretations on, me based on when I am born.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I was actually about ready to go into my phone and put your birth data in so I could get your chart. I'm happy to do that now if you want, but also no pressure.
I'll give that to you. I just I don't like to publicly
I
give
had a
a
feeling that was like, yeah, that was
kind of some of for someone did that, like I had given her my stuff and then she had read it all publicly and then I ended up deleting that interview. It's just because of who and what I do. I just try to keep myself a little bit protected,
yes.
through these turbulent times.
But the reason, part of my reasoning for wanting to do that was to suggest,
Here, I can do it in private chat.
Okay, great. Yeah. The comment about compliments, you probably have some good Sag or Leo energy in there that you like receiving compliments because, yeah, I mean, though you have all that Scorpio energy, it's not all there is to you. There are other pieces and other parts that might not apply, right? And that's where it's really good to, and then the location as well. Really good to get the whole picture before, jumping to any conclusions about anything. So yeah, I mean, so was it just the data, the birth data that you didn't want me to share? I mean, how much should I share here now about what I discovered?
Oh, you can share everything about it. It's just actual details about, the actual details that I'm giving. Everything else, I'm an open. I don't mind, sharing any of that other information and stuff. But, just having actual dates and places. And if, there's hackers and there's just things that, publicly, I just try to protect myself from, just in case there are some obviously energies that I go against on this journey that, would like to, kind of hinder progress is what they say. I don't really get affected by this dark energies. I don't see demons. I see people that have these energies that are projected through other humans that try to get to me and things like that from time to time. But I don't see these demonic energies. I don't see these negative spirits. I don't know if I'm just protected from all of that, but I've never had, any experiences like I did. I got stabbed 12 times when I was fighting a bunch of gangsters protecting a girl. And when I hit the ground, everything went pitch black. And then I had a voice say, "Get up or you're going to die, Jesse." So I had like a voice of God talk to me. And then all of a sudden I got up and stuff. So I feel like I am protected. So that was probably the roughest moment of my life. But I once, when I was doing the High Vibe Love Tribe, I felt like Jacob Rothschild communicated telepathically with me. So that's as dark as energy as I've ever had around me, so that's otherwise I just feel that I'm a very protected vessel.
I'm going to concur on the protection surrounding you. Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about that. I love those examples too. So yes, you do have lots of Scorpio energy, which also explains why we get along, because my rising is Scorpio. So the top three most important components of the chart are the sun, the moon, and the rising. And actually, in ancient astrology, the rising was considered to be more important than the sun. It's just lesser known because you need the time of birth for that one. But yeah, so you have sun, moon, and Mercury in Scorpio, and I have Scorpio rising. So that's where we connect. And it's very easy for us to, communicate. It makes sense why the energy flows so easily between us. You also have a Virgo rising. So another component, right, where our energies mix with my Virgo sun and Mercury. And then I don't want to pat myself on the back too much here, but you do have Venus in Sagittarius as well as Neptune and a couple other asteroids. So with Venus in Sagittarius, valuing Venus complements Sagittarius makes sense to me.
Okay.
So that would explain why in that book that you read, the part about not liking compliments doesn't apply, right? Because it wasn't accounting for your Venus and Neptune also in Sagittarius.
So you can get like a certain reading, but there's so many other factors, right? So putting your name and birth date into just a chart on a computer will only give you a limited amount of, basic on everybody. Now, once you start getting into some of these other details and a little bit more detailed specific, that's when going to someone that's, an astrologist to get more detailed reading specifically towards yourself will give you a more, kind of like focused, reading on who and what you are.
1,000,000%. And that's why I know a lot of people who maybe have issue with astrology or, don't believe in it. They say it's pretty silly. That's like saying you don't believe in Spanish. Astrology is a language. It's not something to believe in. It's math, it's symbols, and it's encoding messages and meanings, but we have to be able to interpret that, right? So one of the things, and I'm writing a book actually about astrology and a few other topics. And, there's a chapter in there in the beginning, in the introduction, where it goes over the basics of astrology for people to just get like comfortable with, how it works. It's titled I don't remember exactly, but paraphrasing, the mistakes of the one sign identity. So even people who know just a little bit about astrology say, oh, I'm a this or I'm a that, but it's not at all the whole picture. And for many people who don't resonate with astrology, like myself, they may have a little bit of energy of their sun placement in one sign and not really resonate with that because they have all this energy in a different sign with the other placements, right? So it's super important to be well informed. But then, if you're talking about the difference between a computer program and a live, experienced person, I'm not here to poo-poo on programs. I use programs in my work. So it's not about that. It's just that there is no substitute for the wisdom of lived experience. And so for people who want to learn more about it, it's good to keep a little bit of humility and understanding that there is no final place to get to. And that's where I take issue with a lot of these astrologers who are in their ego about it. Like it's like that medical ego, the God complex of like, oh, I have this, lesser known knowledge. So I'm like so great and perfect. And I've arrived at this place of like final knowing. You might find that pretty easily in the medical field, but it's much more inauthentic, in my opinion, to see that in astrology because, this is true, I'd say, about all knowledge and wisdom, but in our established society, there's this notion that we know everything there is to know. And there's, that's it. I know this, I know, and I can't know anymore. I've learned all I need to, and I'm done learning, right? But with astrology, that's very disingenuous because it is literally infinite. It is constantly changing. You won't see the same chart for every 25,000 years or something. And even in that 25,000 year cycle, there are other variables, right? So it really never repeats. And as much as you can learn about your own chart, there will always be more to learn. It is literally infinite. So, it just depends on how deep down that, soul exploring self-knowledge rabbit hole you want to go.
How about politics? Do you discuss that at all? What's your thoughts on the political situation that's going on here in, America, the world? What's your thoughts on what's happening, where you see us going? I just wanted your take on that, if you don't mind.
Not at all. No, it is exhausting because I think it's designed to have become that. I like to believe, or maybe I choose to believe, that there's good even in the darkest of places. So I don't want to just, paint politics as evil, but I'll say this, I'm having a hard time not doing that because it just seems so purely evil. I'm wondering, where are all the good people? They don't seem to be at the top. I don't know. I don't know about your audience. I don't care too much what people think. This, loses me business a lot, but that's part of why I do what I do, to just be who I am and not hide it.
You're going to resonate with the right people. So it's, you be you and the right people will come, because even though, there is business, you don't want the business of the people that aren't right for you anyways. Right. So it's, the best is just to be you, and people will appreciate that more. And then you'll bring in the right people towards you.
No, that's pure wisdom right there. There's no doubt about that. So, so I'll say what I'm about to say. I just know it's been such a polarizing topic for many years with, Trump and everything. I think he did some great things. He did lots of great things that we didn't see any president do in decades. And he did also lots of shitty things too. I'm not blind or, ostrich head in the sand to just idolize. I don't idolize people. I'm not into that sort of stuff. So, was he good? I don't know. Would I like to see him as the next president? Yeah, preferably to anybody else. I don't see anybody else who might even potentially do a fraction of the good that he did in his last term, even though he also did lots of crap stuff. So I just feel exhausted by it. And it's like, who knows who to trust and, what's really going on. But I do believe that there are good people out there in the system. I think that the bigger issue really with politics is the way it's been used as a means of social control, and how, the whole idea of democracy that's become so like evangelized in modern society is that it works when people participate. That's how it's supposed to work, right? And with our country in the United States, I don't know how it is in Canada so much, but we have been lulled into this stupor of just, I don't know, lazy non-participation. So it's just like, I think the biggest issue with politics that I'm seeing in the US is that everyone's just wanting mommy, daddy government to take care of all their problems without really wanting to get involved personally in any way. Now, that's a gross generalization, not everybody, but too many, way too many, and probably more than the majority. And that's the bigger issue. I think it's easier to point the finger at these politicians or pray that they're going to save us. But if we're not looking in the mirror and how we're participating in the system, I don't think there's really much hope for any change. And I think that's the bigger issue about politics, is that people are just giving away way too much of their power to the system and not recognizing that we are co-creators with the system, especially if you get into the metaphysical about how our mind and thoughts create things, right? So, I wanted to go into politics a little bit. I mean, not really wanted to, I just thought I could make a difference, and I have enough integrity that I wouldn't totally lose my soul or sell it, that I might actually be able to help people. These days, I feel that much less. I mean, it's actually even in my astrology. I got a Vedic reading about 10 years ago that said when I turned 40, I was going to go into politics. So who knows? We'll still see what happens. But I don't have a lot of faith in the political system at this point. I just feel like it's way too corrupt. I wonder if it's even salvageable at this point. But for sure, much more important, I think, than pointing fingers externally about the system is to point it at ourselves and see what we're doing and what we can do to improve the situation, to reclaim our power and to improve the world. Because if we're just going to continue to outsource our power, I don't see us improving the situation at all.
What's your thoughts? Do you think that there is this plan for a new world order to, take control of everybody and everything on Earth? And then one step ahead, or one step further, if you believe that, do you believe that there is some kind of a devil or a Satan that's trying to destroy all that is good here, to destroy the planet? Because it sure seems like it's a crash collision course for destruction. There's a lot of beautiful people here that are staying grounded and keeping this thing going. But the way things are looking with, these fires and these injections and all the kind of stuff that's going on, it doesn't really, look like it's very promising.
Such a great question. You ask really awesome questions. It's a really good one. Wow. Okay. There's a few parters in there. So where shall I begin? Let me take a second.
I just let source lead the way, right? I used to start off with writing down a whole bunch of questions for the person and stuff, and I felt that really detracted from the flow. So I just let things flow, and as the questions just pop out as source wants it to.
You are channeling the source well. I will say that then in that case. So I want to answer your question with a little bit of my own journey. And I came to this awareness right around the same time that I discovered the cancer, which was also the same time. So this was almost 10 years ago, actually like 10 years ago exactly, when I was going through this time in my life. And I also started to see the connection between trauma-based mind control and child sexual abuse in the church, right? Like I had this epiphany based on my own experience and my own history of childhood sexual abuse, which I definitely had that trauma, contributing to my situation, was that, the church was molesting little boys, not because they had, sexual dysfunction. It was by design. It was purposefully done to create this trauma-based system that we all live in, right? Because there's no better way to create a childhood slave than to sexually traumatize.
Take away the innocence.
Yeah, it's like it's the most deeply personal, private thing to have stolen and violated and all these things, right? So it's like wipes any sense of boundaries or safety and justice, and just like primes the personality for narcissistic abuse and to be on the receiving end of, torture and all these other things. So at that time, I had a psychic experience, psychedelically induced as well, but it was also culminating on, again, years of previous experience as well on this topic. And so, are you familiar with the term egregor?
Which?
I believe it's pronounced egregor.
Maybe not.
Egregor. I think that's the right. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Egregor, egregor, something like that. I might be pronouncing it a little bit off, but basically, it's this idea that, again, thoughts are things, right? And if you have enough people thinking in a certain way or believing a certain thing, that mental energy can actually manifest other things, like, phenomenon.
I believe we are ultimate manifestors. We're creators. You can manifest things. Your thoughts create things. Is that kind of what you mean?
Very much related, but let's use the idea of deities, right? So whether you believe in Jesus or not, whether you believe in Hindu gods or not, there are millions of people on the planet who do, right? And communicate with them on a daily basis, having conversations, right? So that thought form and that energy, that mental energy that people are putting out into the world and the psychic space that we all share, even though we might not see it, actually becomes a kind of entity, right? It becomes its own entity. It's not necessarily a living being of its own right, because it's being sourced from multiple, masses of people, but that doesn't change the fact that it has an energy and a power and a source behind it, and that energy, power, and source can have effects and results based on it.
I use that analogy a lot for revelations. If enough people believe it's going to happen, they're going to make it happen. And that's kind of the way it just manifests into reality, because people are willing it into reality, whether or not, if it was prophesized or not. If everybody decided that's bullshit, we're going to come together as people, then none of those revelations would come true. So were they really revelations, or were they revelations because it was manifested by the people to make it happen?
Great question. Or is it predictive programming, right? Did they put that and, keep that up from bloodline to bloodline because that's their long-term goal of controlling the world, right? So, really, really great point. I mean, if we're giving up our power and just saying, oh, well, we can't do anything about it anyway, so let's just fall asleep and give up our control. Well, we're missing the point of being here, right? We're here to create. So let's create. So, again, back to your question about if I believe that there's a Satan or some kind of entity. So the first thing I want to say about that is, I think the biggest issue with that is that, Satan originally was represented as a scapegoat, right? So, and has in large ways became a scapegoat and remains a scapegoat, that people use the idea of this external force having power over them to avoid taking responsibility for their own shortcomings, right? So in that sense, I'd say Satan is very real, in the sense that people project their own stuff externally so that they don't have to deal with it and be responsible for it. In that sense, no question. Yes. And if we consider the thinking of an egregor, that energy and that pattern and so many people doing it could manifest a kind of entity that behaves in such a way, right? But I want to talk about something a little bit lesser known and perhaps a little bit more poignant. And this might offend some of your audience. I don't know, might even offend you if you have strong Abrahamic leanings. But around this same time, when I came to this epiphany and the psychic experience, I was looking at the Catholic Church and looking at these energies and looking at the subtle entities that are invisible. I also had another healer from Barbara Brennan who I saw or just spoke with her about this as these experiences were coming up for me, and I asked her about this. I was like, "What do you think about demons and entities and are they influencing this process? Are they, getting in the way of our healing? Are they holding it back? And she said, it has everything to do with these entities. Now, she didn't mean that in a sense of again, giving our power away, but just pointing out that there are real and invisible spiritual forces that exist that interact with us for better and worse. So if you want to talk about angels, light beings, spirit guides, yes, 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 all those exist. And then demons and dark forces or ghosts, yes, 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 all those exist. But I think our thinking is often limited, and we expect it to be exactly as we perceive it and can miss how it actually is based on our perceptions. So this like kind of grand aha epiphany that I had at that time was based on the teachings of Gnosticism, right? I don't know how exactly, I'd always been interested in it. I always felt a strong resonance with the idea of gnosis and the power of gnosis as self-knowledge and experience being wisdom, right? And so I always strongly resonated with it. But at that time, I attracted this information that just totally blew my mind because, I had heard things about Gnosticism and that, and it was, I'd say, pretty superficial until I came across this one guy. I don't remember his name. I could look it up, I'm sure, because there's not a lot of people talking about this aspect of Gnosticism, right? So I'm going to share a little bit of his story that he shared. It's the Gnostic creation myth. Okay. So, you could call it a myth, you could call it a story. I would probably prefer to call it an account. And so basically, in ancient times, when Gnosticism was like, really thriving, I'd say it's still thriving these days, but under other names. These ancient seers, they were yogis, they were mystics, they had opened their third eye, right? They had done the metaphysical work to be able to perceive beyond the physical and see the subtle realms. And so this is where they got this information from their own gnosis, right? From their own perception and experience. And there was a corroboration. It was like, they're all coming to the same conclusion based on their own gnosis, right? So it's not just like fantasy. And so this is the information or the creation account that this Gnostic, story was talking about. So basically, in the beginning of our solar system, there were two creator gods at the center of our galaxy, and they would seed their creations into the limbs or the arms of the galaxy, right? So it's like, little test tubes of life factories on this planet and that planet. And so they're creating, right? They're these gods who are creating. And so there's a male component and a female component. I don't remember the male's name, and we'll go into the female component a little bit more because she's really, I'd say, the star of the show in the sense that she's the unsung hero in most religions, and I think a big part of the distortions that we're experiencing on the planet at this time. And so, okay, you have the male and the female, and they're doing their creation, but this was a special occasion because it was either her or both of them wanted to create something new, something that had never been done before. And so they called her Sophia, right, which means wisdom in Greek, I believe, if I get that right. And so Sophia wanted to create this new thing, but, hadn't really done it. And there was a kind of mistake that she made, like an unforeseen consequence of her process of creation, where she accidentally created these entities or these creatures. And this is in the creation of our own solar system. So it said, I'm going to do my best to recount the basics of this as accurately as I can, but it's said that in this story that the planets themselves in our solar system actually predated the sun, the moon, and the earth. The sun, the moon, and the earth came after. And the sun was actually the male principle, that male deity that was working with Sophia. He embodied himself as the sun. And Gaia, to correct her error of creating these sort of accidental creatures, embodied herself as the earth, Gaia Sophia, we can call her, right? And so let's talk more about these creatures, these entities, and how it relates to Abrahamism and the current situation we find ourselves on the planet, and the poignancy of it, and why I feel compelled to share this story for people who listen. So they call it her error or her correction, right? It's kind of a translation thing. But basically, she created these beings, these non-corporeal, so no body entities, beings, I suppose. There might even be some debate about that, who exist only in the mental realm. So they don't even have physical bodies or even maybe energetic bodies. It's just a mental thing. I don't know exactly all the mechanics of it, but these creatures were jealous of humanity's ability to create because they were not gifted with that divine gift that Gaia, Sophia, the male counterpart, imbued into humanity. And so these creatures, they used to call them the archons. I don't like that word because archon means lord, and they're not the lords. I mean, some people might say, but those people who say that are the ones who are kind of working with them because they
The
want
ones that are archons.
Yeah, they want to be the lords. I call them the wannabe lords or the ankle biters, because the thing is, they are actually, just to use this terminology, this might upset some egos out there, but inferior in the sense that they are not imbued with the divine ability for creation, right? So all they can do is copy and mimic, and one of their main activities is they like to bring humans down to their level because they're jealous of us and our ability to create, right? So what is their level? Well, it's subhuman. They don't have humanity. They don't have compassion. It's all just mentality and consumption, right? So it's basically all the worst qualities and characteristics that you would attribute to humans. But this is where it gets a little bit dicey, and it might seem like a scapegoating thing. It's not really, and I'm not intending it to sound that way at all, but there's nuance here, because they want to bring us down, and they try and trigger us and niggle us in all of our weak spots to make us jealous, to make us angry, to make us like them, right? That's their MO. And so this is where it gets really interesting. Did you have a
kind of getting out of our primordial state and into a mental place of, chaos and confusion?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And halting and getting in the way of our evolutionary process, which, might have started at one place, but, there's a perpetual trajectory. So, but here's where it's really interesting. And this kind of just blew my mind. So these creatures, we can call them archontic, which is like that they try to want to be rulers, because it's not exactly saying they're rulers. They're trying to be. Archontic is the word I like to use. So these archontic forces are actually part of a hive mind, right? So they all share the same consciousness. It's all connected. And there's one creature at the very top of this system who's like the queen bee. I mean, I don't know if it's female or male. I don't know about that energy so much. Maybe it's female. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. But the point is, it's in charge of all the, underlings. And it's said from these Gnostics who, perceived this from their own experience, that this creature, it's called different names, Yaldabaoth, Cthulhu, Yahweh, whatever. It doesn't matter, I think, the name so much. But this, the top of the hive mind, that is the God that is spoken of and written of in all the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So the God of the Bible is essentially this top archontic force that exists to usurp humanity's dominion over the earth by disconnecting humanity from the earth. That's my ad lib, because of a couple other things I'll mention. So first of all, this is where it's really compelling and where it made me think, because they perceived that this entity, this creature, whatever, wanted nothing more than to destroy the planet and all of the people on it, and to do so by creating a holy war with the world's three major religions, which is pretty interesting if you think about it, because they're all basically the same religion coming from the same source, Abraham, right? So it's like, why are we going to argue over whose religion is better when we're basically all practicing the same religion, just at a different point in time?
Makes no sense.
0, 0, 0, 0, which gives credence in my mind to the idea that this religion is not all it's cracked up to be. Now, that's not to say that there's not truth in the Bible. Two truths and a lie will get a lie much more assimilated into society than just straight up lies, right? So there's definitely tons of truth in the Bible. But this idea of some sort of kind of negative overlord that's existing to disconnect humanity from divine source, I think is very compelling. And the final point about it that I really want to make, that I think just sells it and sends it home, is the notion of this patriarchal system that exists to disconnect us from our experience of God, our gnosis, our own personal experience and connection to God, by externalizing it, by masculinizing it, and ignoring the most close divine creature that we have access to right beneath our feet.
The most sacred.
Most sacred. We have nothing without the mother. we'll have a spinning ball of fire and no life around it without this beautiful planet that we live on, right? And it's not to say that, the feminine is better than the masculine. I don't do that polarity thing. I think they're both perfectly beautiful and
They're
divine.
equally as important. It's just when they've inverted it for patriarchy to put matriarchy below and beneath, then
Yes.
now we're out of balance, we're out of harmony. So that's where we need to get back to that balance again, where we can have, the divine feminine, divine masculine living, flourishing together as one entity instead of one more important than the other.
Absolutely. Perfectly said. And again, to reiterate that final point is like, we don't have to, I'm a sun worshiper. I love the sun. So don't get me wrong, but I don't have to go to the sun to contact divinity. It's right beneath my feet. And this is where the suppression or complete ignoring of the feminine principle is a huge barrier to our connection to the divine. Because if we don't connect with the divine goddess underneath our feet, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to evolve. We're not going to progress. We're going to get stuck in our mind, and we're going to keep cycling through these negative hoops that have been laid out for us by these less than savory entities, whatever we call them, or beings or whatever, whether they're human or not. But the interesting thing about that, our archontic forces, is they will overtake people, right? They will infiltrate people's minds and make people react. Now, this is where the nuance is really important, because that doesn't make us victims. Because there is, at least on a if it's not a very deep subconscious, maybe somewhat conscious level, a matter of our choice in the process. So we have to be vulnerable and receptive to allow ourselves to be taken over by demons or entities, right? We cannot have that happen unless on some level we're giving our consent. And that's the thing. And that's where we can actually turn this around and realize this is where her correction, Sophia's correction, was to actually manifest herself as the planet. That was like the whole big deal. She's like, okay, I'm going to support my children of humanity. I'm going to be with them to carry them through this so that we can ascend out of this, archontic matrix and, to the full potential of divinity. So we need her to do that. She needs us also to do that. That's a co-creation. And if we're disconnected from the earth, we're living in our heads, all completely in electronics and fake foods, we're cut off from that root source, the root chakra. The greatest source of healing that we have access to is her. And also the greatest support when we connect with that energy. God, the deepest healing experiences, or some of the deepest, if not the deepest I've had, was directly connecting with Gaia, Sophia, whatever you want to call her, and feeling that energy at the core of the earth. It is divine. But we have to open our root chakra. We have to open our energy system. We have to open our mind to be able to access those things. And, that does require us to get out of victim consciousness, but that's part of the blessing of these archontic forces and how her role in our co-creation is set up to support us in transcending this. Because the good news about these little ankle biters is that they can actually serve us to show us our blind spots and our weak spots and where we need to evolve and grow and let go of our anger, our resentment, etc. Right? They can be our greatest teachers. And in that sense, they have been, because they are massively supporting the evolution of our planet by giving us such a contrast of negativity to see our own stuff very clearly and where our souls need to evolve. So it's not about creating fear. It's not about giving our power away. It's about understanding the unseen hidden forces of this reality that we live in and how we can best navigate that to our highest possible realities.
That's beautiful. Great story. And what group of people have had that deepest connection with Mother Gaia and has been targeted the most by the colonialists?
The
Native American Indians.
Yeah, and it was before even colonization, because again, these archontic forces have been working since the dawn of time. I do believe, I think it's beyond belief though, because I've experienced them myself as well. And I think it also helps to understand, again, not to victimize anybody and say that, if someone's being an asshole, they're just taken over by some archontic force. But it can help us to have a little bit more compassion, to be like, you know what? They're not actually in their human self right now. They're allowing themselves to be taken over by non-human forces. So they're not even behaving on a human level. And that's why they're appearing as so evil. That's why they're being so vicious and malicious. And so maybe in that place, we can also separate the behavior from the person and still have compassion while setting boundaries and, guiding them out of it, uplifting them out of it, because nobody really wants to live there, but yeah, I mean, some people choose it. Some people don't realize they have an alternative choice. I have a friend of mine who's wise to this conversation, and he was talking about it with one of his spiritual teachers. And he was talking about this, his spiritual teacher was talking about how those archontic forces will also eventually evolve, right? Especially once we evolve and are no longer a food source for them. That's basically what they do, is they live off of our energy. That's what the whole term about loosh is about, right? It's these entities are feeding off our negative emotional energy because that's all that they can process. They can only absorb and consume the negative energy. Well, eventually, when there is none for them to eat because we're not giving it to them anymore, they're going to have to learn to subsist on other forms of energy, which would mean they have to evolve. Right. So we're all on this journey together, and, compassion is going to get us there a lot farther. I mean, love is really the way, but the trick with that word is it's so overused and diluted at this point. What that means can be very different for different people, and also just inaccurate in so many cases. People misuse that word. But if we follow our heart and that inner knowing and that inner feminine, right? The feminine is internal, the masculine is external. We've been so programmed to focus exclusively externally, specifically to disconnect us from our heart, which is one of our greatest connections to Gaia. So if we can just bring all of that stuff out and in, from out to in, and then even down, like, we'll actually be able to fly and grow much further than we would in any other way.
That's beautiful. And that's why some modalities like grounding, taking off your socks and shoes, just walking the earth, gardening, digging into the soil, sun gazing, looking at the sun, getting the energy. Some of these grounding things help us connect us back to the earth and get that true connection like we're supposed to be living in. And we've been programmed to be in our mind, and our mind has gone crazy, for most senses. And, it's hard to, especially if you have, empathy, and to know and to feel what's going on, and to feel what's happening to the earth, which to feel what's happening around. And then they use that by the news, the media. They use that and they pour it into us in order for us to stay disconnected from who we are by living in this fantasy world of make-believe, this false matrix reality, instead of, connecting back to earth and source where we're truly meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, perfectly poetically put. I can't add anything to that.
There was one other time that I seen some kind of entity, and it happened twice in a row. It was when I was in Thailand. I was on day 5 of a 65-day trip. I was supposed to do 30 days in Thailand and 35 days in Australia. And on day 5 of 65, I crashed a motorbike into a lawyer's office window, and I broke my heel in 2 places. And so I was stuck on Full Moon Party Island for like 3 months. And during that time that I was there, there was an American ex-military guy who was like a shaman, and he came and he asked if I wanted to try DMT. So I'm on with my broken foot, and I had tried it the first time, and then I tried it like 4 or 5 days later a second time, and both times the exact same experience happened. And so when I did that, all of a sudden I seen this. It was like these Egyptian goddesses that were dancing all seductively, and they were trying to draw me into their energy, very like sexy entities, but with a snake tongue. And it was like, I felt like it was like Medusa, where I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to give it my energy. So that was the one time that I was actually felt a little bit nervous, because I felt like if I gave myself to this entity, that there would have been trouble, right? Like I just felt like I didn't. So, and then 5 days later had the exact same thing happen, and then it just faded away, and then the rest was beautiful colors, and the rest of the trip was good. I had this dog, like all the dogs, because I'm very animal based, children and animals just seem to gravitate towards me. So this one dog came, and I could my eyes were closed, like I'm in this dimension, but I could see the light of the dog, and it came, laid while I'm on this trip, laid right beside me, knew that I needed it. And then I just put my hand and I could feel the light in my hand and the light of the dog. And it was just such a, like a powerful experience. I never tried it before and I never tried it again. But it was interesting how some people said that that may have been Sophia, in that energy. Or there was another one. No, someone said from the Bible. There's some I don't know, lady from the Bible that they thought it might have been, or whatever, this entity. But it was interesting that I had that exact same experience twice in a row.
I agree. I mean, I'm curious to know. So the first time you basically decided to withdraw your attention from it, and then what happened?
It just faded away. Like, it was trying to pull me in. It was trying to pull me into this entity, and I wasn't looking at it, but I could, like, when you look out the corner of your eye, you can kind of see the silhouette. So I could see it, but I didn't want to look at it for some reason. I just felt like I shouldn't look at this thing. And it felt like it was, it was like all just seductively, and all this Egyptian music was playing, and they were dancing and trying to bring me into it. But I didn't want my energy to go there. And then it just faded away. And then the same thing happened the next time. I believe that was when the dog came the second time. Or maybe the dog was the first time. And then there was someone else that came. And I remember someone said, "Is he okay?" And some lady grabbed my hand. And then she grabbed, like, just like in the little place that I was at. Physically, she grabbed my hand, and then that entity went away. And then everything was just all lights and color and stuff. So it was interesting, because I had never ever felt an entity like that before. I'd never seen anything that I perceived as like a negative entity. I've always seen things here like this is a heavenly realm to me, right? Even though it's been taken over by people that want to control others and the money, and there's a lot of suffering and all this kind of thing, I still look around like we have the freedom to choose, to breathe, to love, to move, to experience. Like I believe this is a heavenly realm that was just taken over by these archonic, mind virus that has really poisoned a lot of people. Because I live pretty balanced in my mind and in my head. I don't have that that darkness pulling at me.
Yeah, I mean, wow. So okay, so both times you basically had kind of the same experience, and then I'm just wondering, like, I guess how you, I don't know. I find with all these things, there is like it's either a spiritual test or a message. Maybe it's both, right? So I wonder if you experienced it that way yourself, like if you felt like you overcame some kind of temptation, or if you broke through in something, or you even learned something from those experiences. Did you feel like you learned something from those?
Oh, I felt like it was just trying to take my soul. Like whatever it was trying to pull my soul into it. And I've been very protected here, and I opened myself up to this realm that I'd never seen before, experienced before. And if I would have went into it, I just feel that it wouldn't have been a good thing if I ended up, giving it my energy and just going to experience whatever it was. I
Mhm.
feel that it may have changed me and
Mm.
who I am and what I am and what I was doing. And I maybe wouldn't even have been here today doing this, because who knows, how that would have, altered me as a person and what I did, and use the power that I have in this realm, to do good, opposed to maybe, to do not so good.
Mm. Yeah, for whatever reason, my intuition is suggesting that it would have been some kind of like sexual possession. Maybe you would have become a sex addict afterwards and just like couldn't have done anything else but think about sex because you invited it in, right? Because that's kind of the energy it was sending out. And the soul-consuming energy, no good. It's just nobody really needs that. So well done for avoiding that debacle. Yikes.
And plus I had my broken foot, and so I was in a
What are your
vulnerable
left foot?
place. My left foot, yeah.
Ooh.
It was my left foot was broken. I broke that foot a bunch of times. Like, I had a tib fib fracture where I snapped my leg in half. It was in an after hours club, and I stepped in a little hole in the floor and my leg snapped in half.
Hmm.
So that's both my left foot, and then my heel broke in two places there. at that point. So I've my left foot, but I was feeling vulnerable. And then I'm in this place where there's no other people that I know. So I was thinking thoughts of like, what if they're trying to take my money and my bank card? And like, it was just really, it wasn't the most peaceful of energies. For somehow this was until that entity went away. And then everything just became peaceful and colorful and lights and all kinds of goodness. But both times it started off in a like a place where it wasn't the best of energies, and so it wasn't one of those appealing things. And I've had friends, hey, do you want to try? No thanks. Like, if I was ever to do it again, it would be with a shaman in a maybe Peru, or with ayahuasca. Maybe I try one day. But
Vet your shamans.
yeah, 9.5 years ago, I stopped all synthetic drugs. So, I was I was on a reflexologist, and after I stopped drinking alcohol, and then 6 months later, I went to a reflexologist. But at that time, during those 6 months when I stopped alcohol, I was still consuming lots of like MDMA and like those type of things. And some random person massaged my foot, and I fell asleep, and I woke up, and she said, you got a lot of callus on your heart. And I was like, really? And she's like, do you do a lot of ecstasy? Some random person asked me if I did, and I was doing a lot of MDMA. And I said, I go, no, but I have. I go, but I've been doing lots of MDMA, which is kind of like that. She goes, well, you better be careful, because I could feel the callus on your heart. That was the last day I ever did a synthetic drug. I couldn't believe that some stranger could massage my feet and knew that I was doing too much of these synthetic drugs. And that was it. Never touched it again.
Well, again, well done on you. It makes sense because reflexology, has a map of all the organs and everything that connects to the nerve endings that go to the feet. So makes sense. I'm curious to know if you were wondering how I knew it was your left foot.
Yeah. Did you see it or feel it?
Nope, it was basic logic because of your story and this, feminine symbol showing up for you twice. And, the injury, I mean, again, injuries being connected to spiritual lessons or tests, etc. And so the left side of the body is the feminine side. And that's how I didn't know, but I suspected it was the left side of your body because of the feminine symbolism that you were processing at that time, right? It sounds to me actually like you probably had some kind of medium level to whatever, low, high grade, I don't know, exorcism. Like it's like some entity was trying to interact with you. Maybe you picked it up there, who knows where, whatever. Or, again, the reason why it's kind of difficult to talk about this stuff is because it's unseen. And it's actually really perfect that we're talking about this on a Pisces full moon, because Pisces is all that stuff. Pisces rules all the unseen realms, right? The spiritual, the things that, beyond this realm. So part of why Pisces can also be a confusing energy is because you can't pin it down. It's not physical, it's not material. So how do you know for sure what you're dealing with? How do you know for sure what we're talking about? But we can still feel things out, and we can still intuit and allow our guidance to lead us there. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for sure what it is. And I'm not here to diagnose that for you or anything, just to offer some potential possibilities of suggestions of what it could be. But it sounds to me like, yeah, there was some energy. I think that's an easier, broader term that's safer to use. That would be, safely accurate to say there was some energy that you were processing through your system that through that experience, you were able to purge. And that's why, after the second time you had those positive experiences with it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it was the left foot. I broke my foot in 2 places. The last time I broke my foot, I broke the tibia and the fibula. So I broke it twice on the left foot. So it's just interesting how that you picked up on that. When people tell me stories, one of the gifts that I have is I see things. So as you're talking and telling different things, I can see pictures and images, and I kind of watch it like a movie going on. So that's kind of what I like doing what I'm doing, because all the people that I talk to, I get to see all these fascinating things that they talk about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not a boring work to get into, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And, if you wanted to learn more about it, you could study the reflexology map of the foot a little bit and see where you broke your foot and what potentially organs are associated with that, right? That's one of the other things I do in my course, is to help people learn how to self-diagnose using particularly Chinese medicine through face mapping, reflexology, and the meridians, because you can find out so much about your body just by understanding these energy maps and how it all connects. I mean, even all the meridians have emotions associated with them and psychological processes, like, the lungs are grief, and the heart, I don't remember the heart, but the kidneys are fear if they're out of balance. And, there's all these different things. So yeah, the body is immense in its wisdom. And if we only just listen.
So tell us about the course. Tell us about what's on rawlifeyoga.com. How can people contact you, connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So the course, Never Get Sick Again, 44 Days to Immune System Mastery, is a remote online detox course, primarily utilizing the principles of alkalinity. But, as one of our viewers here was talking about before with the carnivore diet, even the carnivore diet is acceptable during this course. It's really just about, utilizing all the best tools that we have available to listen to the body, give it what it needs, and also process those psychological, spiritual, emotional components and lessons that are involved in healing. So it's a 44-day course. There are 5 group sessions where, we share, we talk. There's a lot of healing that can happen in the group container. So it's actually a big part of the course is community. A lot of people who are doing this healing work, who are, tired of doctors telling them that they don't know what's wrong with them, or gaslighting them into saying that there's nothing wrong with them, or, just spinning their wheels and spending thousands and thousands of dollars with no results. It's about giving them support and community to say, hey, listen, you're not crazy. There's other ways. We can find ways that work for you. And that's another big principle of the course, or just practice rather than a principle maybe, is, there's flexibility inside of it. So alkalinity is pretty much the primary guiding principle, but you can use fruit cleanses, you can do juice cleanses. There's lots of different options that people could choose that are not just strictly under the umbrella of alkalinity, because again, everybody's different. So not everybody's going to need the same principles. The idea is listen to your body, follow where your body is leading you, follow your intuition, choose the top 3 detox methods that you feel the most resonance with. So lemons, for instance, are one of the major recommendations. And I was mentioning this before, but I didn't actually get to the point. You can have 3 to 9 lemons a day with 0 issue of overdose for most people, barring any citrus allergies or sensitivities. It's recommended to have 3 to 9 lemons. And I'm talking lemons that are like that big, You could do limes too. They're both beneficial in different ways. So, outside of the Dr. Sebi thing, there's different nutrients in either of them. So I would just say go for whichever one your body prefers, whichever one you think tastes better. But either way, if the limes, you'd probably have more because they're smaller. So let's say, 9 to 18 limes a day, depending on their size. And that in itself is such a massively powerful healing tool. I mean, if any of your listeners just chose to do that for themselves right now, they might not even need to take my course because that knowledge is so valuable. But there's more to the course than just the knowledge. It's, the structure, the setup, the community. There's lots of things that are involved. But that's one example, right? Like super dosing and high dose vitamin C, incredibly healing and valuable. Most people are so deficient in vitamin C, and it's one of the main metabolic tools that our body uses for everything, for immunity, for digestion. It goes on and on the list. So if most of us are highly deficient in it, it stands to reason high doses can help heal things like cancer, and it does, right? And the list goes on. Celery juice is another major detox method that people can choose if they like, and they resonate with that every day, multiple times a day. I mean, it's about finding what works for people and supporting them in that and the choices that they make. Another good example of a major detox that people can do is diatomaceous earth, right? Kills parasites, removes heavy metals from the body. We definitely focus on heavy metal removal because that's a big part of many, many common diseases is heavy metal toxicity. Parasite cleanses are also strongly recommended throughout this process, right? So, but basically the idea is you pick at least one, but ideally 3, and stick with it throughout the course, the duration of the course. We also focus on each organ system. So the large intestine, the kidneys, the liver, the heart, the lungs, we're focusing on detoxing each organ to support the body's healing process, right? Because once we get the detox out, the body will naturally heal. And so this is a course for people who don't want to do healing in a vacuum, who don't want to be gaslit anymore, who want to actually find support, community, and even joy and ease with their healing process, right? It's going to start in the end of October. We have 2 eclipses happening. Hold on, I have the dates here in my calendar. The first eclipse is on the, hold on, where'd it go? Sorry, just bear with me 1 second.
All good.
Well, it's okay. I don't have to worry about the dates, but there's 2 eclipses in October, and it's going to start basically the end of October, like the October 28th, I think is the date, on that last eclipse. Now, eclipses are major energy portals. Astrologically, fun scientific fact about that. In a solar eclipse in particular, the moon blocks out the sun, right? And then the sun's light doesn't hit Earth because it's being blocked by the moon. And when the Earth is not receiving that photonic energy from the sun, the Earth's electromagnetic field basically kind of stops during that duration of the 8 minutes of the darkness or whatever. So if we think about the implications of that and how the resetting of the Earth's magnetic field can also influence our own electromagnetic field, aka the aura, we can understand just how much eclipse seasons can be powerful portals for change and transformation. I mean, you see it every eclipse season. So, I'm going to encourage you, I have the dates on my other phone. I'm going to encourage you to look at eclipse season and start to pay attention. If you haven't so far, start to pay attention now, moving on in the future, paying attention to eclipse season and seeing just how much shit hits the fan during eclipse season. It's usually 2 weeks. Sometimes it can be, 4 weeks, but it's when the most change happens in the least amount of time. And they're every 6 months. So we see like big, massive changes and upheaval even during eclipse season. But if we work with that consciously, we can get the most out of it. So aligning this next course with the eclipse season just seemed like a no-brainer to me. But it'll be at the end of the eclipse season. We'll have registration probably end a couple days before. So people are kind of getting into the energy and really aligning themselves with deep and profound spiritual change. Because it's not just, about healing the body, and that is a big component. And it's not just about the physical stuff, even though that's a really important component, as we've talked about. It's a lot about the spiritual work and reconnecting with our heart, with our emotions, purging all of the stuff that's getting in the way of us living our true and fullest potential. And so that's one of the things that, we focus on during that course. So if you're interested in that or any astrology readings or online personal training or yoga sessions, feel free to reach out to me. You can send a contact message on my website, Raw Life Yoga, but probably just better to send a direct email to info@rawlifeyoga.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do have occasional deals on astrology readings, especially for new clients. So that's definitely something that you can inquire about as well. And this course will definitely be competitively priced. There will be a sliding scale available for those who qualify, which just means for people who actually need it and who aren't just trying to, get away with something. So
we have here, Claudia's asking, how long each day is the course?
Sure. So we have 5 group sessions. The first one will be on day 1, and then the subsequent ones will be every 11 days. So day 11, day 22, 33, 44. And it's about a 90-minute call, usually around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But that will depend on the registration and the location of people who register, because it is a global course. So like the first one I did had participants in India as well as in the United States. So, I have to do my best to accommodate everybody. But of course, there's only so much we can do. So there'll be certain flexibility or, considerations to make it as accessible for as many people as possible.
Amazing. And last question, what's your thoughts on the next 3 months till the end of the year? Turbulence, goodness, what are you, foreseeing that we're all going to experience? Because supposedly September 15th is a big date, October 15th as well. There's some major shifts apparently supposed to happen. So what's your thoughts on what's here to come in the near future for us all?
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually going to take a quick peek into the charts on September 15th, because I've been hearing about that day too. I haven't seen myself what that's about or why. I wonder. Yeah, I don't see anything astrologically just at first blush. There could be something that I'm missing here. But to answer your question about, good or challenging, both mix of both for sure. I mean, that's just a natural part of the process. I think it's really important to keep in mind just how significant thoughts turning into things can be. And so it's not to be afraid of our negative thoughts and negative emotions that are connected to them, but to just be conscious of them and to not let them get away from us, almost like turning into their own egregors or entities that are just leading the show when really we have choice in the matter. So I'll give an example with COVID, right? Because for most of the world, I would say, I mean, aside from the billionaires who, made more money off of it than like in history, most people obviously in the world really struggled with COVID, but there were plenty of people who weren't billionaires who had like the most amazing times of their lives during COVID, right? And I'm using this as an example to show how much our own choice and interaction and co-creation, our participation with reality matters in terms of whether we're going to have a positive or negative experience. And so resistance will pretty much guarantee us a negative experience. Holding on and being attached to our suffering will also be, almost a guarantee for negative experiences. One of the ways I'll put it is, we can experience negativity and not suffer. It's possible to just experience the negativity without adding suffering on top of it. And that's depending on our resistance. If we resist the negativity, that's where the suffering comes in. But if we can, I don't know if embrace is the right word, but accept the negativity, we dissolve the suffering around it. Then there's just the pain, and eventually that moves through because it's all temporary anyway, right? Everything's temporary. So we have so much potential to influence and affect the future that I think, we really want to stress and focus on that. And, we're hearing things coming down the pipeline. I've heard lots of different people, I don't know, lots, let's say half a dozen or less over the past couple of weeks talking about, more machinations from the world government trying to control, future things coming in the near future, blah, 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 blah. And I was just kind of like brushing it off because, just assuming it's fear mongering. First of all, I don't give too much attention to those narratives in general. Sometimes that's to a fault on my end. You can be too positive and optimistic. I've learned that over the years. But in this case, just yesterday, I got what I would call more solid information, at least logical, with regards to conversations about there being a potential future lockdown coming soon. So I should potentially research this a little bit more. But since you asked about the future and everything coming up, it's possible that they're trying to do this. And the reason why, the information that I got yesterday that makes me think, okay, I'm not going to just ignore this now, because I've heard that there's a new vaccine that just came out. I don't know if you heard anything about this. You also heard.
Our government bought a whole bunch of doses of some things, so they need to put it into the consciousness of fear in order for them to sell, because they've purchased all of these things already. So if they scare the shit out of the people and say, look, you need to get this thing to make yourself safe in order, otherwise their investment, just goes out the window.
Bro, you seriously just take the words out of my mouth so many times. That's basically the point I was going to make. And, it's fear mongering marketing. That's all it is. I mean, it's not all it is, because they do have, disproportionate amounts of power, because, we've kind of abdicated that to them over the course of decades. But the point is, we don't have to comply. We don't have to participate. And I think we are poised to see that in a massive way, more so than we have ever before. Because, as much as, I'm not super ecstatic about the pandemic and everything, but I am grateful in many ways for the unexpected blessings that it's brought, namely how many people have woken up because of the stark, glaringly obvious, naturally honest evil that has presented through this process. So again, now I'm not ignoring these, whispers through the grapevine that I'm hearing about potential future lockdowns. Maybe they'll try it, but that doesn't mean that we have to agree or comply. It doesn't mean we have to make it easy for them or even give it any more of our attention and energy than absolutely necessary. So if it does come, okay, so what? Like, it's perfect time for us to stop pretending that we are not sovereign and that anyone else has power, or anything, any entity, creature, etc., has power over us that we don't give to it first, right? That's the issue. That's the lesson as I see it. And if we can remember that through whatever garbage that they're planning down the pipeline, it's just going to lead to their demise that much faster. So, in that sense, what happens in the future depends so much on us. But one other thing I'll say, there is a collective reality that we have agreed to be here. And there is also a vastly infinite personal reality. We kind of all get our own universe. As you said before, we're all at the center of our own universe. So even though we are coexisting in this collective reality, we do still have very, very much say over our personal experience of that reality and what manifests through that. So even while the whole world is, falling apart, we can be living in heaven because of our choices and the actions that we're taking in alignment with those choices.
100% is how you perceive it, and whether or not this is true or just some conspiracy people that play with whatever a lot of emotions are going on. That's what they put into the consciousness, is that they want this lockdown to happen again. A lot of these vaccines have been purchased. How could they have a vaccine already for a new possible variant that's not even out there yet? So it doesn't any of this make sense. But Maxime Bernier is one of the Canadian politicians. He's like the purple PC or the purple. I forget what his party is. Anyways, he's one that people resonated with, kind of supporting the truckers, and he's not the left or the right. He's the purple party or whatever. He was telling an email that was sent. He said, do not comply, do not wear masks. Yesterday or today, I just saw Trump coming out, there's potential wanting to lock down, do not comply, do not wear masks. I think that's the message that's coming out, for people. And I think whatever it is to transpire, now is the time for people to show their true colors, where they're at, whether or not you want to be controlled by others, or whether or not you're going to take a stand and say, you know what, you don't have power over me anymore. Do not close your, Trump was saying, do not close your business, do not wear the masks, do not comply, do not shut down the schools. So this is kind of the message. So, now more than ever, people will see, and plus they've seen over the last 3 years, if they, are awake and aware and have had people that have been injured by these injections or whatever, that, now is your time to show who you are, what you stand for. Do you stand for truth, freedom, and love, or do you just want to be a part of this transhumanized system where they take away all your rights and freedoms, and and the choice is yours. You don't, they're not going to force you. Like they said, they tried to force people, you can't get on a plane, you can't do this, but still you rolled up your arm, you rolled up your children's arms, you did that willfully. They didn't force anybody to do any of this stuff. And I believe that's going to be the case now, but probably just a little bit more mind manipulation, a little bit more pressure. And we've got a lot of good people out there that are standing up, speaking out, and have been doing that for years, for decades for some people. And it's really important to choose wisely, because all of us collectively will figure out the road. It's a pivotal time in history of which direction we are all going to proceed on, because it is the power of the masses. So if the masses act like asses, the ones that are, really awake and aware, that don't have their crown chakra stuck up their root chakra, we're going to be affected by, the masses' choices. So that's why this work that we're doing, and everybody that is, waking people up. And sometimes people say, well, none of my family listens and nobody hears me and I'm an outcast. But every seed you plant, does grow. It may not grow now, may grow in a week, a month, a year, but it's always growing. So don't stop planting those seeds, because we are all, with this quantum entanglement, affected by everybody else's choices and decisions. So just you standing strong, you being a firm voice for freedom, is, affects all of us. So the more of us that we are standing for our true rights and freedoms, the better we are all going to be through whatever it is that does come.
Yes, so well said. And another point I want to share, because I struggled with this for a long time. I might still occasionally. I feel like I got a lot better after the pandemic, because I learned this through the pandemic, of not needing people to listen as much, or if at all, really, just being clear and steadfast enough in who I am and what I stand for and what I put out there in my message, that's enough, and not feeling, because I felt a much stronger compulsion in the beginning to convince and change people's minds and like almost force them to listen, because I was afraid that it wouldn't work otherwise, right? It's like, so my need to control others, even if it was like for genuine good, was still misguided because it was coming from a place of fear, and therefore much less empowering and effective, right? So in this sense, my point is to say that if we can communicate those things from a place of not needing them to hear us, they're going to be much more likely to hear us. If we're going to communicate from just a clear, solid stance where like we're so grounded in our own being, we're like emotionally and psychologically, mentally unmovable, they're going to move. Not because we're forcing them, but because we're inspiring them by our example, right? So to connect with what you said before about the whole revelations and like, well, we can make the apocalypse happen because that's what they want. I mean, it's the same idea. We can give our creative co-creative consciousness power up to them like they want us to do, like they did last time with the first, scamdemic. Or we can see this, dispel the fear, move through the fear, breathing exercises are amazing to dispel fear. Just slow your breath down for 5 seconds or slower. And you automatically shift the nervous system from the fight or flight to the rest and digest, right? This is basic yoga, and it's one of the simplest, most powerful tools that yoga has to offer, right? And that will shift our consciousness. Just breathing generates consciousness, gets us out of that monkey mind, brings us back into presence, brings us back into the body and the heart. And that can not only shift our energy, but also shift the environment, right? And as we move through the fear, as we surrender, confront it, move through it, surrender, and move on, they can't touch us. There's nothing left for them to try and overpower us with. And from that place, we get over this notion that there's a lockdown coming and there's nothing we can do about it, to there's a lockdown coming and it's going to be the last one that ever even tries to happen, because we're going to see through it so masterfully, they'll never be able to try it again, right? That's our choice. We decide, not them. That's the lesson as far as I'm concerned.
100%. And it seems like, whoever has been pulling the strings has been wanting like a big F you to God, to creation. Now it's our turn to say a big F you to them. And, it's our turn to take our power back. And I think that that's, really the way things are molding, because there's more people awake now than ever. In this last 3 years, I've seen more people wake up and become aware of what's going on than I've seen in the 30 years combined. And so it's very, very good and powerful. And I had somebody that, because I've been doing this for a long time, that they said I had to unfriend you, I had to block you. I couldn't, comprehend at that time what you were saying and what you were throwing down. And they said, I'd shared a post of somebody, I don't know, somebody's aunt shared one of my posts, and they seen me, they had to message me and say, hey, I wasn't ready for your message at that time. And this person's now taken my message and run even further and harder with it than before. And it's just little small things like that, know that we are moving forward to a better place. And if we truly believe it in your heart, if you believe the fall's coming, if you believe destruction's coming, if you believe that we have no hope, then we don't. If you believe that we can come together, we can stop this insanity, we can get back to balance and harmony and start taking care of our sacred Mother Gaia, our earth, once again, then we will. And, that's where I believe. And I won't stop believing that. As long as I have breath here, I will fight for balance and harmony, because I believe this is the true heaven, what everybody so aspires to want it to be.
I just got so many goosebumps like all over my body after you said all that. Yeah, 100%. And another point about that kind of made me think, what you were saying made me think, there's also so much support in the spiritual realms. You call it your higher self, call it God, call it the creator, call it angels, whatever you want. We can ask for help when we need it. We can ask for support in those unseen realms, and it will come to support us. But here's the caveat: we have to allow it to, right? First of all, just asking oftentimes is enough, but we can't ask and believe that it's not going to happen, because then we won't allow it to, right? We have to allow it to happen. So there is so much support available to us that, I mean, it's beyond even, I think, what we can imagine. But yeah, we totally can do this. And I have great faith. You know, I'm actually kind of getting a little excited. I'm not saying I want or need this to happen, but if it does, bring it on. Let's go. I'm like, I will rise to the occasion. And I think, you know, more important than myself, we will rise to the occasion because of everything you just said. You know, more people awake now than ever before. That makes me really excited to see what could potentially come as a result of, you know, being a mechanism of action in a universe of divine potential. Well said, Amanda.
And what you said is really important and powerful, because there's so many people that believe in God, believe in, you know, another realm, believe in a higher power, believe in ongoing life, but forget that they're here with us, that we're not alone.
It's easy to forget, but
they want us to forget. They've tried to get us to forget. You know, when
the
programming, when you're a child and you see something, or what does the parent say? Oh no, you didn't really see that. You're just imagining that. Instead of, what was that? What kind? Did you communicate with it? Trying to, you know, actually, you know, show, you know, that there is more out there. We've been closed off from it. We've been led to believe that there isn't anything out there. That's what we've been trying to program. And we're not alone here. There is so much, you know, the source has our back, and, you know, we are going to get through this one way or another. So just don't fear, live in your love, and stay true to yourself through whatever this is that we have to experience, and we will be fine, and we will make it to the light on the other side.
And so it is. Yes.
Well,
yes.
I love you, brother. Thank you so much for this time. It was great getting to know you better. You're a beautiful soul. It seems you got lots of wisdom going on inside of you, and appreciate you being able to come here and share some of these missing links about you or the world around us that you wanted to share here with everyone.
Bless you, brother. So much ditto to that. I mean, I've always loved you and your energy, and just seeing your smiles and your Facebook, never mind the brilliance of your words. But this was a really excellent experience, super inspiring and invigorating and energizing. And I'm just delighted and honored to have been able to share in this time with you. So thank you so much. I wish you and all of us the greatest of success, and, you know, to the liberation of humanity.
Awesome. Well, you have a wonderful day. So it is. We will make it happen one way or another. You know, like we have this or this. Life is eternal. So whatever happens here, there's always more than just here. We want to make things right here, and if not, the next one will be better. So I'm not worried. I don't ever worry about, you know, what may or may not happen. I just, you know, flow through this with my chest held high as epically as I can, doing the best that I can, trying to be a little bit better today than I was yesterday, always trying to learn a little bit more, be a little bit better, be a little bit more balanced, be a little healthier, eat a little healthier. I still have my sweet tooth, so I'm still fighting a little bit with that. You know, my late night munchies when I have some cannabis, you know, those are some things that I still battle with, you know, in this humanly body. But I enjoy it. I don't, and I don't beat myself up for some of these maybe unhealthier choices that I do make, because I do it in enjoyment. So I allow myself to be able to, you know, cheat on healthiness, I guess, to say, you know, on occasion here and there.
Goddess loves our imperfections too, so we can as well, and it's nice to see that you're doing that too. I still practice that as well. I mean, I don't always do it, but it's very good when I can.
Yeah, it's okay to reward yourself. It's okay to, you know, to be able to enjoy some of these things. It's just when it becomes out of balance, that's when it starts to hurt us.
Yeah, especially. So great wisdom coming from your source, brother. Just again, such an honor. And yeah, I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Okay, thanks, man. Well, thank you everybody for all your likes, comments, hearts, shares, and stars. We appreciate all of your love and support. I'm Jesse Hal, the host here of The Missing Link. So please share this out to as many people as possible. We've got one more missing link this week, which is tomorrow. We got the Honorable Dr. Sandra Rose Michael coming back for the second time. She was on the first time and then gifted with this Lazalapul EES system energy thing that I've put on. I haven't taken it off. once I put this thing on, started the High Vibe Love Tribe again, my body's healing. And so we're just going to talk to her about her, you know, and her system. And y'all have a wonderful day. May the source be with y'all. May the source be with you, Adam, and everything that you do. And we'll see y'all next time we see you back here on the Missing Link, or wherever we see you in this quantum reality we're all entangled in. So love y'all, and we'll see y'all later. Thanks so much, Adam. This was great.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Many blessings.